This episode has to do with addiction. This is a story about Daniel Wells, who's our guest on this podcast, and talking about his long battle with addiction, which started at a very young age, 11 years old when he first started drinking, and where that took him over the next 10 or 15 years. He's sober today. He's been sober for quite a while. But the story is very scary as an adult and as a parent to see how quickly a young person can slide into a very dark and lonely world. So with that, I'd like to have you sit back, listen to the story. If it resonates with you, please tell others about this. Give them the direction to this particular podcast. And I hope it's helpful for some, enlightening for others. And with that, sit back and enjoy the process and listen to Daniel's story. He's a very, very articulate, smart, young, and at this point in time, very happy man. And glad to have him on the show. So thank you. Just do what we're doing right now, man. We're going to talk, get right into it. And so,
nice.
Yeah. And then I'll do a whole intro thing later right on, so people will know what we're coming into. All right, man. Daniel, welcome. Appreciate you showing up, being here. This is going to be an enlightening, interesting, and fun podcast. So
I'm stoked to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, it's going to be very cool. So you got an interesting story that one of the reasons I reached out to you and wanted to have you on is because I believe that your story, while a lot of people in your position may not want to talk about it or just keep it to themselves, which understandable, but you have chosen the other path, and that's, be open about it, talk about it. And I think personally that it's a service that there are a lot of people that this may resonate with. And I also think that there are parts of the story that I think are very important for friends of friends, parents of children to hear, because the issue with dependencies is it can go to a wide variety of people. It's not prejudice. It will the rich, the poor, the famous, the not so famous, totally. Everybody is susceptible to whatever it is. Kids that come from poor background, no male figure in the house are susceptible, but no more, no less than a kid coming out of a home full of love and middle class and all of the right surroundings are just as susceptible to it. So this is a story of, so that all our listeners know, this is a story of addiction and dependency. And we're going to talk to you, and you're going to, kind of take us through what got you there, man. Yeah. I know you. You're a beautiful human being. You're a very nice guy. A friend of family. And if I didn't know you and I didn't know the story, I'd be shocked. What got you on
Thank you.
Man?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And you're very right. It is a wide range and variety of people. There are some, dispositions and things genetically and just socially that kind of create a space and an environment where that may thrive more, right, than others. But ultimately, I've always said, and I've heard it said that, if anyone tries hard enough, right, you can definitely get addicted to crack or something like that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like that's just how it goes. You're less likely to want to turn to something like that, though. If you're emotionally validated, or you've had like a little bit more of like a secure connection, to family and to people that are around you. But ultimately, yeah, it is a part of my story for sure. And you know, the biggest thing ultimately, what I kind of drive it all up to is really having that love for myself, you know, really searching for who that person is. You know, I think we're all like really looking for where we fit in and what our purpose is and what we want in life. And, you know, it doesn't always come so clearly. So we all have our journeys and our, you know, lessons and they kind of get us, you know, to our full sense of self, you know, and, drugs and alcohol happen to be a big part of that for me, you know, and I'm totally open about it. I mean, it's trying not to be like too proud. That's almost like kind of where I go to with it. You know what I mean?
Right.
I'm so grateful that has been my journey, you know, and that I have this unique opportunity to help others, you know, that are struggling. And it's like, it's always been, I mean, since humans have, you know, fermented grapes, it's been in our, you know, you know, genetic makeup to want to like abuse these things, you know, and so all the way fast forward till today, you know, where we see that this epidemic, you know, where people are, you know, losing their lives and we're losing loved ones. And you're right, you know, like it is a lot about the families and friends and the people. We've all, you know, a lot of people, you know, have been touched by, you know, alcoholism, addiction, and dependency chemically. So it's, I really do also believe that it is very much so a prudent, you know, topic for today.
Yeah.
So
it's, you know, for you, especially knowing you today, which we'll get later on in the show, you know, of where you're at and, you know, and what you're doing today to stay sober and also what your dreams are and, you know, where you're going. Cause that to me is just as important a part of the story as hearing about where you were, how you got there. But, you know, starting off, what was it? What was, you know, what was the beginning for you? When you look back, what do you think this was the stepping off point for me to get me to where I was? Yeah.
I mean, if you know, you define that by like when I first started to take the drugs, and turn to, you know, drugs and alcohol. It was alcohol first, you know, I was younger. My mom has said it before. She blamed skateboarding. She's like, it was because of the skateboarding. I know it, you know, it was like before skateboarding was like a Olympic sport, you know, it was more for degenerates and, you know, and, yeah, so she thinks it was about that. Honestly, that was like a big indicator when the drugs started getting bad was that I stopped skating, you know, and I remember at the time that was like what I loved most, you know, and like, I remember watching friends like get into it and start drinking and then stop skating. And I remember being like, wow, like, how could you ever like stop skating? You know, that's what I thought I was going to do. I was just like, I'm just be a skater. Like, this is my life, you know? And I'd watch people stop and I'd be like baffled. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And then I remember that the first moment I realized that I hadn't skated in months and I was like, whoa, you know, this is
How old
real.
were you at the time?
I was 11 when I coming up as like a young kid, you know, we'd like skate, we had footy. You know, I had a friend who was 16, so we'd get in his car and we'd drive around and go skate. And, you know, and then, you know, in all the skate videos, it's like, you know, it's like part of the culture, you know, and like Piss Drunks was like a big, like a little crew of skaters, you know, and it's called Piss Drunks PD. And so I had PD written all over everything before I even took my first drink. Right. And, right. And we actually made our own crew in the same font, but it was DR and it was Dirty Rats. And I was a little poo rat. And we had like a bunch of them. We had like Scrub Rat, we had Pimp Rat, we had Dirty Mexican Rat, which is my homie Manuel, and we were, you know, we made little shirts on like Microsoft Paint and put them on there, and it was pretty fun, you know. We definitely like had that, but there's definitely this like kind of dirtbag culture that came with that, and you know, so it didn't help, but you know, as for when it like really first started, I remember taking, you know, my first drink, and it felt good. You know, there was definitely this sense of ease and comfort, you know, that came with that first drink. I remember feeling like, you know, because I did grow up feeling, you know, a little outside of myself, you know, things that I feel like normal kids like go through. And like I said before, like finding where you fit in, finding what your purpose is, you know, and, you know, a lot of that kind of just like goes away, you know, and taking the drink and not really caring what people were thinking or like where I was at, you know, I just fit in, you know, and for me, it became like being the life of the party, right? Like, and being funny and doing the most. And I really, truly like identified with this sense of self that was like, you know, drugs and alcohol. And slowly, it literally became my identity. You know, I was so young that I didn't really have a persona yet. I wasn't, you know, I didn't know who I was as like a man or a human in the world. Mm-hmm. And here I am introducing, you know, these mind-altering chemicals, and took pride in it. I obsessed on it. It was, you know, definitely a big part of my story. And a lot of people that come in younger, you know, that don't have that, I noticed that it becomes more of their identity, you know, as opposed to just something that they're maybe partaking in. Where there could be this delusion of maybe like, oh, it's, you know, it's not that bad. You know, for me, it was like, I knew I was an addict and alcoholic pretty young. I'd say about like 14 is when I realized that was probably what I am, because it was all I talked about, surrounded myself with, and cared about, you know. And but for me, I was like, I'll make it work, right?
Do you think at that point in time, at that age group, it becomes kind of a I don't know, kind of a badge of courage, a badge of, you know, being different, being that guy, being the one that, you know, because there's probably others that were drinking a little bit or doing a little bit of drug, but not to the extent. And you always knew you were that guy.
I think that there is definitely a correlation between those who tried and those who like experimented and those who like really ran with it. I feel like those people kind of didn't really feel like they fit in their own skin in general. Mm-hmm. And, you know, like with that came, you know, I mean, you add drugs and alcohol and it's kind of like that goes away. And also I have these other people, you know, that I do this with, and there's a sense of community and camaraderie. You know, it's like, it didn't matter who you are or, you know, what our differences were, like we could use and drink together, and it's, you know, we can work together towards a common goal type of deal, you know?
Right.
And, you know, I know that's definitely part of the, and like I said, like we're all developing like our identity and our persona. And for me, that was just like a really big part of it. Like right off the bat, you know, I obsessed, like I'd research and I like love to, you know, like just know all about it, you know. And I remember going, you know, my first stint at like recovery or treatment was, I was 14, and it was like a program after school that I would do as a freshman in high school. And I was fascinated by it. You know, I loved learning about it. It was like definitely something that, even though I couldn't, like they'd be drug testing us and stuff, there was still this like obsession, you know. They talk about that a lot, the like mental obsession, right? Mm-hmm. And, you know, so, you know, and like I said, I knew I was an addict and an alcoholic. I didn't know exactly what that meant at the time. You know, I just was like, this is like what?
This is at 14.
This is you know, I was 14. Yeah. And, you know, I left home at 16. You know, I started making a business out of, you know, doing drugs, you know, mm-hmm. And like a lot of people do to kind of support their addiction and their habits, you know, and things kind of seemed manageable for a long time, you know. Relationally, they definitely were not. It was very unmanageable, but I didn't know that, you know, between my like intimate relationships and like my family, right? Those were all struggling, but, you know, I was able to kind of block that out. You know, I did.
If you don't mind, talk a little bit about your family, about, you know, at 14 years old, they're watching their son, you know, go through a hardship that a lot of adults can't handle, and now at 14 years old, they're seeing this. You know, how are they taking it? You know, what's going through their minds? How are they dealing with it? How are they, you know, how are they handling the situation with you?
Mm-hmm, totally. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, I know that there's a lot of guilt, you know, that came, like an overwhelming sense of responsibility, right? That's your child. Right. And they're going through this issue. Like, why are they doing this? Like, you know, this is very personal to them. And also they're like responsible, you know, and both of my parents, you know, they, you know, struggled with drugs and alcohol as well, you know, and that's definitely like part of their story. And they really didn't want to watch me go down that road, you know. And they turned everything around, like for, you know, my mom started going to school, like when I was young, and I'd be sitting in the back of the class, like in college, so she can, you know, become a nurse. And, you know, my dad was like, help support, you know, he's like got a job, and, you know, he was helping us, you know, pay for rent and stuff. And, you know, they just turned everything around. And then, you know, I got a little sister, and, you know, they bought a house, and they really created this whole life. And so they wanted to be like not my kid, you know, like absolutely not. And then they're watching me go down that road, and it's kind of like, especially my mom, she was the one that was like very much so like, absolutely not. Like, whatever I got to do, I will fix it. I will help, but really it wasn't her battle, and I think that's like, we take that, and I couldn't imagine, I don't have kids, but I could imagine that something that you like created and brought into the world, to know that like, really it's not your journey, and it's, God forbid, I deal with that with my kids, but I know that when I do, pass down things to my children, that I'll also make sure that I'm passing down some tools so that they can help. But, for them, it was not easy, but they came to the treatment classes, they put me in like inpatient treatment, when I was like 14, and I wasn't ready. There's really nothing they could have said, done, or, I was on my path,
Yeah.
All they could do.
Is it true what they say, that the only way you can recover is that you have to want to recover?
Yeah.
It has to be your idea.
Yeah.
The whole idea of, family or friends, whatever, surrounding the person and hijacking them and, putting them in a recovery doesn't work.
Yeah. Against their will. Absolutely not. Like, you can't get someone sober. I mean, you can like have the intervention and like get some willingness from them, maybe inspire some willingness to go, be like, hey, we really want you to go. Will you have this decision to go,
Right.
I mean, I know a lot of kids that just got kidnapped, in the middle, and they got sent to Utah. That's like a big thing that happened. Didn't happen to me, but like against their will, you get sent there. And I don't really agree with that. Maybe it planted a seed for later on, but ultimately, it's for people who want it. And to go a little bit further, it's for people who are willing to do what it takes, right? It's not,
right.
Not for people who, need it, or for people who necessarily want it, but people who are willing to go the distance, and wanting it is usually like a big part of that.
Right.
The willingness, and with that, it also has to be coupled with hope. You got to have some hope,
Right. So the whole thing then started out when you're 11 years old. You started drinking. And then by the time you're 14, you're totally into drinking, into drugs. Your addiction is in full blossom.
Yeah.
How then at 16 you were out of the house?
Yeah.
And you're on your own, and you were still doing everything that you were doing, but how long did that last?
Yeah. So, I mean, from there, I was 16, kind of like took off, was, hanging out with friends who, their family life, it was a lot more lax. We could get away with a lot more, my parents were definitely more strict, growing up, which is like pretty wild. I was always grounded. I was always in trouble, always got everything taken away, like they tried so hard. And so of course I'm like, dude, I want to, I go over here, I'm like, to my friend's house, and we could stay up all night. We can go out, we can do whatever we want, and that's all I wanted. I just wanted to do whatever I want, and not have any, consequences or someone breathing down my back, so it was like finally once like I was out and it was all me, it was, like a relief, to be able to just like, basically looking back now, I didn't know it then, but to have just drugs and alcohol, ultimately, right. To continue this like fear-driven escape from myself, right. The bondages of self. And, I continued, like I said, I made a business out of it. Things seemed to go good. I got all the validation I wanted. They called me Danimal. That was like we got into like the rave scene, and that was like my raver handle was like Danimal, then ended up becoming like my like criminal handle basically, and was like everyone called me Danimal, and I just took so much pride in it. I thought I was so cool. I was like, this is awesome. We had like a shuffle crew, like we'd go to different like raves and parties, and we'd like battle people. We had crews, and we'd like recruit people, and ours was called 5PD, and it's comedic to me now because it stood for 5 pills deep. And we had it blasted on our shirts, you know what I mean? And when I say I take a lot of pride in recovery, I also took a lot of pride in being a dirtbag and being a drug addict, and like I thought I was so sick, and the reality was that I had surrounded myself with so many of those people that I was, they were like, damn, Danimal's got it, everyone like looked up to me as like this person who like somehow like, had it figured out. And really, it was like looking back, I was so lost, and just so like, yeah, we were like having a good time, and, stuff seemed fun. And I was getting the validation, right? Ultimately is like kind of what it came down to. Like,
right.
I don't know who I am, but like, I can mirror back, like, what do you think I am, right? I can be whoever you need me to be so that I can get the validation that I needed. And ultimately, like, on a more serious note, that's kind of like what that was, and, I got some run-ins with the law, I mean, just to kind of talk about the progression, it kind of started with, marijuana and alcohol, and then very much in just whatever I can get my hands on. Then it was like mushrooms, a lot of the psychedelics, a lot of the party drugs, that's how I could like, really like kind of justify to myself that I'm like expanding my mind, and becoming more like in touch with myself and my body. And ultimately I'm just running from who I am,
Yeah. Yeah. You're just wanting to get fucked up.
Yeah. I just wanted to get like and it's mind boggling, I don't need to talk about like amounts and just like stuff, but basically I was always like pushing the limits and finding the right combination of chemicals, and, I had a good amount of money and a good amount of resources and connections. And I would just, I was really pushing the limit for what I could take, and it all kind of seemed like a party on the outside,
This was what shocks me, standing on the outside, obviously. And this is a daily endeavor. You didn't take days off.
I didn't draw a sober breath for minimum 10 years, onward to 15. Like, that's 100%. It was every night before I went to sleep, first thing when I woke up, right? It had to be something, and ketamine was a big one for me. The specifics, is like the drug-a-log that kind of goes through it. Is like ketamine was like a really big one between me and my people. And, that was like really bad. And it's so disorienting and incapacitating. It's mind-boggling that there's a good like 3 to 4 years where that was like a consistent all day, every day. I would leave some out on my nightstand before I went to bed to do in the morning. And I would just keep doing the one on the nightstand, right? It just never ended, and then like finally I'd be out and then there'd be some there, and then it was like right when I started and I'm trying to talk to people. I'm driving around with multiple life sentences in my van and I can't even form a sentence, it's crazy. Like, I know I talked to you, about a week ago, and I was just saying how many chances I've gotten, and it's wild. Like, someone up there, out there, in here, whatever, like, really is looking out for me. Because
something, somebody, somewhere has got a purpose for you. Though there is absolutely no doubt to that. So during this period of time, and I keep going back to family because part of this story is for parents to look at and say, okay, there's a red flag.
Yeah.
So early on, we see that that you were. Do you think that it was the environment that you were in that kind of put you on the path, or do you think that even a different environment, you still would have found your way?
That's a great question. This is it's a philosophical one. Some people, nature, nurture, some people say that they were born alcoholics. I think it's a combination. I do think that there is a genetic disposition, right, to kind of allow just physiologically, like how you respond and how you get your reward chemicals and kind of how, those things progress. But it's also a lot the environment, right? Like feeling, the sense of ease and comfort that was felt was this is like getting your needs met, like when you express like who you are and your deepest truth and you feel held and you feel like validated and you feel not judged, and like, that's like the feeling that I got, when using, and a lot of that is like, I don't know what makes or breaks. Like, I don't know if there's like a criteria, being a parent, like looking out for these things. It's, a lot of depression, anxiety, these things go hand in hand, and especially with the youth today, I mean, it's rampant, being able to address those things. And I think emotionally, like having that, emotional clarity and emotional intelligence is really big. And I think that like one thing just in my experience that I've noticed is, households that are, more communicative. It's anything's open to the table and there's time and devotion dedicated to that communication and that connection, right? Having a strong base. That's what I will give to my children, an open platform. And ultimately what it comes down to is like, doing my own work,
There has to be, to kind of go off topic for a second there, there has to be a safe environment for a child, teenagers specifically, to feel like they can come home and have an open dialogue without any ramification of whatever the dialogue is.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, as parents, we let down because we want to be judgmental. We want to have our opinion.
Yeah.
And rather than just to sit and to listen to what they're going through or what they're thinking is, plays a big role, because I hear so many parents talk about, well, I try to talk to my kids, they won't talk to me. Well, then maybe you better step back and say, are you giving them the right platform to talk, to be open, to express themselves?
And I'm a firm believer that, we're all doing the best we can with the information we're given, with the information that we have. My parents did the absolute best they could, right? You know what I mean? When I first, got sober, it was, crucial to kind of dig into a lot of the fears and things surrounding like childhood, like the things that might have come up, and taking a look at that. And there was a big resistance, I was like, dude, to look at my parents in that light, like what they might have did wrong or what they might have, was like, I was like, how dare I even try, like they did everything to make sure I had a good life coming from, nothing. And the reality is like being able to take a look at a lot of that stuff with no blame and no judgment, and realizing that their parents did the best they could, with the information they had, so on and so forth, and, I think the biggest thing is really like, I don't know, as a parent, the only advice that I would be able to give in that sense, is, to do that inner work yourself, is to be able to be a safe place for yourself, right? You can't transmit something you haven't got. You can't give what you don't have. If it's a safe space that you don't have in your own heart, the privacy of your own heart, it's going to be hard to then give that to the child, and I think that this is just like, why, it could affect anyone, you know what I mean? Like obviously there's places where it breeds a little bit more, but ultimately, we all deal with these struggles. We're all humans and we're all learning to feel whole as we are. Right.
I think also too, as, as parents, as adults, we want to look at the world and then we want to find areas we can point a finger at and say this is to blame. You take social media, for example. Social media is a huge area for parents and adults to point the finger at and say, if it wasn't for social media, this wouldn't be happening, or this wouldn't happen, or it's right now. You had mentioned depression amongst young kids today, and to me, that's freaking rampant.
Yeah.
I mean, it is not
disassociation. And
I mean, that's just, being the father of teenage girls, and I see not maybe just their friends, or not just, people that they know, but also their surroundings, and where depression has become paramount. I mean, I don't remember growing up and anybody talking about depression.
Right.
Maybe a mom that just had a baby and was postpartum or whatever, is going through some depression. Yeah. But I never heard, anybody while I was going to school, and, my friends, nobody talked about depression. But today it's like, it's like everybody talks about it. You know? So, you wonder what that's leading to.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the depression and anxiety, like and I think that's like a lot of, the parents too are going through that. Yeah. Like just being exposed to the world and kind of the way that we've, been taught to cope with things, this is very like, I don't know, it ends up coming down to like, just being aware of the work that we have to do within ourselves and our own anxiety and our own. And I think that for me, like a big thing for my children, just kind of open it up and be like, hey, like, I want to work on this too. I want to be more honest, and I want to be more secure in myself, and like to do the work, cause it's all a journey. Right. And like, that's what's most attractive to me. And a lot of the like, role models that I've seen in my life, those people that can walk, you know, with that emotional self, you know, and are very in tune with that, but have a humility to really like allow this openness, right, and to create that same environment, right, as opposed to like, this is the issue, like this, like the problem solver mentality.
Well,
right?
It's not just the problem solver mentality, but it's also to let me deflect the problem. Let me place that blame someplace other than here.
Right.
You know, so rather than going internally, rather than looking at it spiritually,
Totally.
you know, we're gonna find something on the outside that I can, you know, lick the back of the stamp and put it right there. There it is, right there. Yeah, that's our problem right there. You know, skateboarding.
Yeah, I did like defer the
Yeah, skateboarding. You know, that's you know, there. My dad, when I first started wanting to surf, and I started getting Surfer magazine, and my dad actually forbade me from having that in the house.
Okay.
Because it was a culture that he associated with you know, derelict, not wanting to work, slackers, beer drinkers, whatever it was at the time.
Right.
You know, and it was only after a few years, I think I was 13 when I started surfing, that he finally gave into it. And I think the only reason was because he met a couple people at work that were surfers. Yeah. And so he kind of saw, okay, there's a different side here.
Yeah.
But it was easy to, you know, lick that stamp and put it on surfing as, oh, no, that's a bad path. You know, you're not going down there.
Yeah, the reality is, and it's like social media, or it's like video games, or it's like whatever it might be that we're blaming for like the youth. It's a lot of it is, I mean, you can't blame the whole world for everything that's happening, right? There's got to be like a sense of responsibility, and a lot of that is like, you know, they are your kin, so there is an overwhelming sense of responsibility to like, how are they interpreting these? Like, what are the boundaries they're setting down? You know, you've got the world in your hand, and it's like, I mean, you can blame the world for everything, right? But it's how we acclimate, right? And how we, I really wish that I had, you know, and me having kids and raising them, it's going to be the most beautiful learning experience I could ever, you know,
well, I guarantee you there's no manual. So.
Okay. All right. You know, and, man, if karma, I don't know, man, like I really hope that my kids don't freaking do, you know, because my parents were like, don't go down the route that we went. And I went like a bat out of hell, you know, way worse than they could have ever, you know, imagined. And like, you know, I mean, I don't know how you could go worse. You won't survive, you know, like it's crazy. But, you know, I'm a firm believer, right? We're doing the best we can. The information we have, like, I've been able to gather some like really crucial and essential information, you know, like in my body, like to embody that information, not just to read and just to like interpret, but to really like embody through work and through practice, to pass that down to my children, you know?
Yeah.
You know, I'll also pass, I mean, they're going to be crazy little fucks, I'm sure, but, you know, I will also be able to pass down a little bit of serenity, hopefully.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that as a father, and between Jill and myself, we have 9 kids, so you know we've got some experience there. Okay. And you know, Steven's over there bouncing his head. Yeah. You know, but you know, one of the things that I have come to terms with over all these years and all these children, and I tell this to everybody, you know, and it's the God's truth. I've never had one day of issue or problem with any of them. Wow. And some of the older kids have grown into really good citizens, good people. And one of the only things that I really have ever had for advice to anybody is spend time. Spend time with them. Don't pawn them off. Don't push them away. Spend the time. Yeah. And when you spend time with your kids, and you're a part of their life, and you're a part of what it is that they want to do, then that communication that we were talking about, you have a basis. Yeah. You have a platform to start on. You jumping off on.
They feel supported. They feel, you know,
Yeah. You know, so I mean, when you get kids and they want to go skate. Yeah. You know, say, fine, come on, I'll show you how.
Let's go.
Let's go. You know? Yeah. And you become a part of it. You got a basis for communication to start out with. Right. You know, and to me, that's a huge, huge portion of what we as parents
Yeah.
do when we're looking at our children.
Yeah. I mean, and as a child, you know, playing baseball and having my, you know, my little sister and my mom and my dad come out like for the games, and we're all there, and just the camaraderie, like those are some of the best times, you know, that we ever had, you know, this sense of feeling connected to one another. Right. And to feel a part of, and to belong to something. And as crazy and chaotic, you know, as it is, you know, how beautiful that is, like to have a full life where
absolutely.
you're together, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's really what life with family and everything is really all about.
Yeah.
It's about sharing those moments, about being a part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But you can also take that and you can overlay that now onto you skating. That's more of a solitary thing.
Right.
It wasn't something that the family,
sport.
it's not something the family's going to come out and hang out.
No.
You know, and watch.
No.
You know,
No, my mom
down.
wanted me to wear a helmet, and so like I had to take a helmet everywhere with me,
Sure.
right? I never wore it.
Yeah.
But I had it with me. Daniel's got his helmet, you know, because I'd be like, yeah, mom, I'm going skate, you know, and so I could never show her any of my footage, because I never wore my helmet, you know.
Yeah.
And she'd be like, I'm going to bring you to the hospital one of these days so you can see all the vegetables, you know, with the intensive, you know, brain injuries and
The
stuff.
downside of having a nurse for a mom.
Yeah. Exactly. You know, exactly. And, you know, and I'd smack the hell out of my head, man. So maybe that has something to do with the drugs and addiction too. But some big ones. But you know, I don't know. That's you know, it's just.
Well, one of the things that I'm hearing from you at this early stage, this early on, is that you're not pointing the finger at anybody. You're not saying this is the reason why, this is the person, or this was the situation, or this whatever. It's like you're taking full responsibility for where you're at. You know, even at a young age, where I would think that at a young age you'd be able to say, well, fuck, man, I was only 11. What'd you expect? I was only 14. I didn't know, you know, but you're not doing that.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
You know, how'd you develop that mindset? What was the...
Yeah. So, I mean, just taking ownership of, you know, where we're at, and the victim mentality, you know, don't get me wrong. Like I played that, you know, I played that through and through. But you know, there has to be a point, you know, in order to change, right? To take ownership of some of these things, like really feel viscerally in your body, owning that, you know, and knowing that you are more than that, you know, that I am bigger than this situation, bigger than this problem, and being able to like wrap myself around it and move forward. You know, it's definitely something that, you know, I struggled with. I just assumed that there was something wrong with me, you know, the deepest core of like who I was. I just figured it was me, you know, like, because everybody I just heard over and over, like, why are you doing this? Like, why? You know, like, what's wrong with you? You know, like, what the hell is wrong with you, right? Like, some of the stuff that I did, and, you know, and so for the longest time, that's kind of like what I heard. Like, there just must be something wrong with me. Like, at the very core of who I am as a human being, that there is something off and wrong. And if anyone knows it or finds it out, they will leave. You know, they will see that person, you know, and, you know, so that was like a big part of like my value, you know, and we were talking about the ego a minute ago, like, and there's a good saying that it's like being an egomaniac with an inferiority complex, you know, this idea of like the world revolves around me, but also like I am nothing, you know? So it's like,
right.
And then people say like, oh, like I'm not much, but I'm all I think about, you know, this like selfishness, this idea, you know, that comes from like just that like neuroses, you know, and, you know, so
it's really odd to hear you say that, you know, you were going through this period of time when you were really flying high, literally, but, you know, no pun intended, but you were really thinking well of yourself, and you were partying, and you had your friends, and you had your, you know,
because
you
really,
know, your nickname, and you had your T-shirts, and you had all this shit, but you know, you're thinking that there's something wrong with you at the same time.
Yeah, well, I didn't recognize it then. Like that was just me living in the problem of, you know, trying to cover up this idea. You know, ultimately, after doing a lot of the work, I realized that was at the base of what it was, you know. So it was like, you know, I got that validation, but when it came to like personal things, right, like my parents or like a significant other, anyone that I was like closer intimately with, they'd be like, once they really, you know, like saw more into me, right, outside of the shirt and the friggin', you know, the drugs, like, that they would mirror back to me, like, there's something fucking wrong with you, you know, like big time, you know,
right.
And I would just run with that, and that just like fueled it, right? Like no one could know. I keep everyone at arm's distance, keep myself at arm's distance, right? I didn't draw a sober breath because a sober breath meant me being with me, and I hated myself more than anybody, you know. And it didn't come off that way though, I was like making everybody laugh and like doing, being the whole thing. And ultimately it was just to kind of fill this void. And, so when it came to like pointing the finger, it was my fault. The big part of the, getting sober is really looking at a lot of the, resentments and fears and things that I've had in the past, and in like going into that, I was like, I don't have any resentments towards anybody. Mm-hmm. Like I only resent myself. Like I knew like that it was me, you know what I mean? Like way more than I should have. Right. Like I was like the worst narrative to myself, and, I learned later on that I definitely do have resentments, that was like very, very clear. We can get into that, but, ultimately, getting, like knowing that there was taking that ownership and responsibility was like, there was an over sense of responsibility with that, and, I didn't really know what to do with that information at the time. And that fueled it,
Well, before we get into sobriety and all, you're 16 years old.
Yeah.
You're not living at home.
Mm-hmm.
You're partying like a maniac.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing drugs 24/7.
Right.
How long did you keep that up? And was there a turning point at some place in there that almost got you to seek some sobriety, but wasn't quite enough, and you went back to it again? Because you're saying that this was a 10 to 15 year journey. Mm-hmm. So, 16, 17, you still got a ways to go.
Oh yeah. So that lasted for a good, till about like 21, I want to say. But during that time, I mean, you talk about addicts and alcoholics, like, something bad happened. You'd think they'd get sober after that. You think that would be it, like they do it for her. He loses the girlfriend or multiple overdoses. I like went to a club one time and overdosed on ketamine. Like I was there only like 20 minutes, and I did too much on accident, and I kind of remember being in the ambulance a little bit. But when I came to, I was in a Hollywood Presbyterian hospital with LAPD standing around me, and I was cuffed to the bed. And I didn't, I was like, what's going on? And they're like, you ready? And I had my shirt like was cut off of me, and I had like all the stickers and stuff. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, all right, get him out of here. Let's go. And then they cuffed me, walked me out, and took me to jail, and like, as I'm walking out, it's crazy because I saw in the bed was my friend next to me who literally like did the exact same thing I did right after me. Like I did it and I did too much, and I went like this and then handed it to him. He did the same thing, ended up in the hospital as well. And, you would be like, oh, and I went straight to jail. And then that's when I had to tell my parents, like, yeah, listen, that's when I told them that I was like, like selling drugs basically. And I was like, Mom, you got to come bail me. I called them, my dad picks up the phone, like, and he'd been to jail, and he was like, listen, like, stay with your race. Don't freaking, stay in your little space. Like, don't like fuck with anyone, be respectful and yada, yada. And I'm like, fuck you. Let me talk to Mom. Put Mom on the phone, What the fuck is this shit? And Mom comes, she's like, God damn. My mom's like, Daniel, what the fuck? She's like almost in tears. I'm like, Mom, I'm like pulling on her heartstrings. Mom, you got to come get me, And she's like, I was like, bail it was only like $3,000. It was 30 grand, but it's, 10%, 3 G's. And she's like, what the fuck am I going to do with that? And so I had to tell her like where all my money was. And she's like, what are you doing with all the money? I was like, I'll just, just get it and come pick me up, and we can talk about it. And you'd think that would be, like, hey, we'd have this thing and maybe there'd be an intervention. There'd be absolutely not. Like I couldn't get back to my life fast enough. Right. Like addicts, alcoholics, when something traumatic happens, that's more of a reason, right? That's just more bullshit on top of like what we've been avoiding in general, right? Not equipped to deal with, right? So it's just like to continue adding that on. So there were many instances of, near-death experiences, near like serious like criminal implications, and I lucked out, man. Going to court, my parents were like, yeah, we'll come with you. Parents are there. They're in the courtroom. I'm dressing like, okay. I'm like talking to the guy. They're giving me minimums of everything, right? They're like, this kid doesn't look, he looks fine. Like he's not, we'll give him a program. He can go through. And it was just like brushing it all off, right? And even going through like court ordered treatments. I would always find a way to like use things they weren't testing for, things that, so it was like I can continue using and drinking, right? There was like nothing that was going to stop me. I always say like jails, institutions, and death, right? That's what's out there for us. Like if we continue and I continue for myself, it's very clear that is what is next. It's no avoiding it. And it's wild because you think, like someone said earlier, they were like, somebody set themselves on fire and then meditated, and died, right? Like, I think I can use drugs and be like totally fine, like, so there's like this idea that somehow I can control and enjoy, right? Like that I can make it work. And that the illusion, right, they say is astonishing. Like we really will just go to the ends of the earth to like try and like convince ourselves that. And it usually kills us. And it's wild that you would think that like, why would you put that much energy into something like that? You know what I mean? Like it's pretty wild.
Or how you can think that you can continue doing something that's so destructive that has proven itself as destructive to you is all of a sudden going to change overnight and be something different than, the outcome that you just experienced is going to be different next time.
Yeah. They talk about it being a disease, right? And when I first heard that, sounded like such a cop out, and it was like really hard to like, it's like, it's a choice. You know what I mean? How is that a disease? It's like what, and there's the disease model, right? The causal model for a disease, right, is an organ that has a defect that creates symptoms, right? So if you could fit addiction and alcoholism into this, model, then it should be, and they did. It's the midbrain, right? The nucleus accumbens, the part of our brain that gives us like our pleasure chemicals, right? When we have sex, when we eat, fight or flight, like, the part of our brain that gets us through the next 15 seconds alive, right? Mm-hmm. And, when we're doing drugs and alcohol, it hijacks that, right? Now, before eating and before sex and before survival, it is now your drug, right? This is like above all else, right? They're doing like experiments with rats, right? Where they give a rat like a little lever or a button to push and it would administer drugs, or like a electrode to like a certain part of the brain that stimulates that certain part. And they'd fry themselves. They wouldn't eat, sleep, drink. They just boom, boom, boom on the button until they're gone, and it's like, so there's a grip. And that, when it was explained to me like that, there's the midbrain, right? The pleasure chemicals. And then there's a defect, which is like the hedonic set point, this like point that tells us like what is good, like what, pleasure chemicals we need to like sustain. Right now we've flooded that. So now that's like higher and it like kind of hijacks that. And then the symptoms are addiction, right? Dependency. And so like it makes sense now, like going back, because other than that, it's like, why would you do something like this? Like I couldn't imagine like stepping on the outside and watching me go through all of this stuff.
Now, is that reaction? Is that something that you're predisposed to, or is it something that you create?
That's something you can create. It's like pathology. I do believe that there's genetic dispositions that might allow for that to happen more, right? But ultimately, that's something anyone can create, right? You flood yourself with the chemicals that you get normally from surviving and doing the things that we do to stay alive. Your set point is going to be reset, Like if you tried hard enough, like you're going to become dependent, Ultimately, like your chances then for recovery also depend on like your emotional stability and your ability to connect with other people, right? And that's a big part of like, and we can get into that later, but so you might not go to the depths of the earth, right? You might be a little bit more well equipped to then like handle that, but physiologically, I mean, you're gonna go through that same hedonic offset point, right?
Right.
For your pleasure chemicals.
And again, this is my ignorance because not ever experiencing anything like that, close to that. But, how do you almost die and then get sobered up after a couple days because you're incarcerated?
Yeah.
You get out and the first thing you want to do is go back and do the very same thing that fucking almost killed you.
Oh, absolutely. That's the insanity, right?
Yeah.
They talk about insanity as like doing the same thing, expecting different results, but we know that that's not the actual definition, right? It's knowing exactly what's going to happen and doing it anyway, right? Mm-hmm. And that's just the like, it's above all else, there's nothing. This is more reason for me to use now, now I got a court date over my head. Now I got, what I mean? Like
a lot of reality hitting you in the face and you just, how do I avoid it?
It makes it harder to get sober too, because the moment you're not taking all that stuff didn't go away. It's all, and now you're not dealing with it like on life's terms, you're dealing with it all right now, and I'm still working through a lot of that stuff, that process never stops. I mean, we can always continue to deepen that knowledge of ourselves, and like really understand why and how we can show up more fully. Yeah, it is a wild thing to like sit back and watch that happen, and I see that a lot, like in the recovery community, like people come in and people go out, and, the people that you think are going to, that are, are going to make it, you're sure, like go out. And those people that you're like, that guy will never freaking make it, there's no way, he's too much of a shithead, and they end up staying, and they end up like doing great things with their lives. And, it's really such an individual process,
Right. Everybody's going to react differently.
Yeah,
totally. Yeah. So, okay. So now let's fast forward a little bit, and you've lived a hell of a life already, and you're only 21 years old. At what point was enough for you?
Yeah, and so then it went from the party drugs. I had saved up a nice little lump of cash. I moved to LA, and I ended up my girlfriend ended up breaking up with me. Ultimately, and then I got a root canal. I'll rewind. I got a root canal. And then I got a bunch of Norcos, and so I started like eating those. At this point, I was like, saving my money to like throw like shows. Like I wanted to take a lot of this like drug money and get away from that and do something like, more legit. And at that point, I was doing a lot of the ketamine, and I had eaten like a few Norcos and was like, dang, this feels good. Like I'm not like, I could form sentences. I'm not all crazy. It's giving me energy, and so very quickly I was like eating 30 to 40 of those a day.
Whoa,
right?
shit.
And it's more the Tylenol that's in there, because it's only like 10 milligrams hydrocodone, 750 milligrams Tylenol. Like that's lethal doses. And I'm eating them in handfuls of 5s and 6, right? And that's just like insanity, right? That's complete insanity. But, that was like no thought, right? And, and then it progressed into like, like oxycodone, things are a little bit more like potent and less Tylenol, and then heroin, and, cause it's cheaper, it's more potent, it's just better, you're just fooling yourself, otherwise. And, and then next thing you know, I've got like a $250 a day heroin habit, at that point I'm like smoking it. So you can blow through a lot, and, things are, slowly just slipping away from me, like even faster. There's definitely this like slippery slope thing that's happening. I'm losing, all my money. I'm blowing through money, right? And, lost my girl, totaled the car. I couldn't make the last month's rent on my place. And so I like took off from there, got on a train, back down to San Diego, where I'm from, to basically be homeless. I didn't even have a ticket. I like cried to the dude when he was like, "Where's your ticket?" I was like, "I just want to go home," had nothing. And, and then I was on the street, for about 2.5 years, 2 to 2.5 years, literally just, hustling to get like a little bit of money just to go and buy a small sack just to get through the day, and, it was really shitty being on the street at first, those like first couple nights, you're like, wow, this is, I'm reaching out to mom. I'm like, hey, like I need, let me get a place to stay. And she's like, she's raising my little sister who's 9 years younger. And she's like, I need to create a safe space here. Like as much as she loves me and stuff, she's like, you need to go to treatment, right? You need to get help. And so I was like, all right, I'll do that. And so I was still on my mom's, health insurance. So I could go to like a nice, treatment center, like a hospital. And, I remember going to detox for that first time, and I had like sat there and I detoxed, and then they were like, you need to go into treatment now. And I was like, no, I'm good. Like I'm sober right now, like I need to get my car back and my girl and my, all this stuff. And they were like really advising that I didn't, and, this started like a 2 year after that, like episode of going in and out of treatment, right? I went to like 22 different treatment centers, I went to 14 different treatment centers in 22 months, just like in and out. Anytime I was on the street, right? And it was rough. It was humiliating. It was, it was really hard. There was definitely this fed more into the, like, there is something wrong with me. I am like worthless. People would see me, like, where I literally grew up, I'm in like downtown Oceanside, and I'm like, it's too cold at night, and I'm like hustling all night long to, like, get my fix. And then I like sleep during the day. And I was just like one of those homeless people, and here I am, I'm like, I'm like 22, 23 years old, and I'm or 23, 24 years old, and I'm on the street, and I'm just like getting my next hit. And it was really lonely, and like I would always have like one other person that like I would, like, we were together, like we would go and, teamwork. Right. And, but I still felt so alone. And anytime I was like with that person, like I would just be trying to get away from them, and finally the moment they're gone, I'm like alone again, and I'm just like, that was like a very, very, very low point, and
that was for how long?
That was for 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah. That I finally like came up and was in and out of these like treatment centers on the street.
Were you using like the treatment centers as just a way you get off the street?
Yeah. Kind of like a spin dry, it would be like, I'd run out of moves, I'd be dope sick. It'd be wintertime, it's cold, right? Like you see a lot of the treatment centers, the beds fill out in the wintertime, right? Summertime, it's parties on, right? If it's warm, people are out. So I would, just go in, they would give you like Suboxone and give you like certain drugs to like wean you off so that you don't, so I'd be like kicking really hard, like I need to go to detox, right? They'll give me soft serve ice cream. I can, smoke cigs and talk about, myself and my feelings, right, for a little bit. And then, it's back to the street, right? And every time I would go in, it did kind of plant a seed, and I would see the happiness, and I would, connect with the people that were there, and I would give it like an honest try. I'd be like, okay, like let's get a sponsor, let's do, like, let's find someone that's like really going to take me through like what their process was, and like to be completely willing. But I always had like my little reservation. I always had my like idea of like how I wanted to do it, and I wasn't completely willing. Right. It was a lot of that in and out, not fully like surrendering, not, always wanting to kind of do things my way. And at the back of my head, having that obsession, to want to use. And there was a lot of like definitely low parts. But until it was, one day I had finally, I was 25 at this point, and I was in Oceanside. I was at Tyson Park, and I'm like sitting in the park, and I've got my bags, all my stuff. I still had dope. I still had like a little bit of money from like hustling, and I had kind of like had this little epiphany that I had gotten kind of everything I wanted. Right, I had pushed everyone away. The cops stopped writing me tickets for sleeping outside. My parents, my mom had finally like grieved my death. Right, I was still there, but she had to grieve my death. Like that was really hard for her to do. And finally, I could just live on the street. I had my little hustle. There was nothing that was going to get in my way to stop me. Right, and it was that moment right there that I was like, dang, I don't know if I want this, I think I'm going to try one more time. I'm going to go and I'm going to get a bed, I'm going to call the detox. I'm going to go in and give it one last shot, and if it doesn't work, I will go lie in front of the train. Right. Because that was like a thing.
And detox, no matter how many times you go back and forth, they never say no. They never say,
I mean, it's what your insurance will pay for, right?
Yeah.
It happened to be right before I got off. So I did a whole bunch of county funded programs and stuff too, like, crash, short-term, long-term, which is like behavior mod. I had tons of programs in like the San Diego area. And, they're like, they knew me by this point, like the intake patient. They're like, yeah, we have a bed. If you want to get up here, if you can get up here tonight, it's yours, and I did, and I went. And looking back, it was, the moment that was different from all the others because, I was doing it for me. It was like the very first time that it was just for me, right? It wasn't because it was cold out or I'd run out of moves or for a girl or the courts or my fam. I was like, I'm going to try this, otherwise I'm just going to kill myself. And, something changed there. I was willing to do whatever it took. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Anything you say, I've sufficiently convinced myself that my way of thinking, it will get me killed, you know, and it sucks for me, right? My best thinking gets me on the street every time wanting to lie in front of the train. And with that came very beautiful things. You know, I found a group of men that could, you know, walk me through what they went through. You know, I could see, you know, in their eyes that they were sure of themselves. They made eye contact. They felt whole. And then when I'd hear their story, I was like, whoa, you know, that's my story. Cause at first I would hear these people talking and I'd be like, dude, I was terminally different, right? I was like that's not me. Like I was different. You don't know what it was like. Like I have it worse. And then I find this person who's like, explain their story in a way that like only someone who could have gone through that same experience could have, you know? And it stuck with me. And then I'm like, okay, well, look at this person now. Like what they got something, they did something, like, what is it? Right. And, I became completely willing to do whatever it was that they did, you know? And, you know, it was a spiritual approach. You know, a big part of that is finding like a God of my understanding, right? Finding something that I can like turn my will over to on a daily basis, something that I can relieve myself from, you know, from my mind, the thing that's trying to get me killed. And, you know, a lot of things changed, you know, from that point. You know, being able to like, to make eye contact with people, you know, for the first time, people to come up to me and say like, you look great. Like, you know, you have like a light in your eyes and you're present, you know, and, was like so beautiful. And, you know, my mother, man, talking to my mother about like, you know, cause she, like I said, she grieved my death, right? There was a point in time where she told me, she was like, if you were dead, I could grieve if you were gone, but you're not. Here you are, you know, still sneaking into the doggy door, you know, to come and get hygiene products and stuff like that. And her finding me in the living room, like jaw swinging back and forth, like, you know, just like a fucking monster, her child, you know, and, like if you were dead, I could grieve, but here you are. And so she got to the point where she had to grieve the death, like I was saying, in the sense that like, Daniel, like when you die, I won't have to see you to have a connection. You'll just always be there, you know? And, you know, so
when she was telling you this prior to you getting sober,
that would be prior.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how did that resonate with you, or did it, or you know what was it? Because it wasn't enough for you to go, I'm fucking changing my ways,
right?
You know, so how'd you?
Yeah,
because that's pretty. You know,
it's pretty wild. Yeah,
that's for a parent to have to do that. Yeah.
I didn't feel emotions, you know, for a very long time. Anytime an emotion came, I did a lot of drugs to make sure that didn't happen, you know, any uncomfortable feelings, right? And, you know, it was uncomfortable. I've said that I was like, if there ever was a time that I would feel bad, that would have been the closest to it, right? But I was just so disconnected, right? So disassociated, so, you know, that it didn't really affect me. It hurt, like it sucked, you know, but it wasn't like, it was very uncomfortable. But, you know, she gave another like example when she was like trying to break it down for me. She's like, you know, it was like me teaching you how to swim, you know? And I remember it would be in the pool at my grandma's house and I'd have your little tiny hands like in my hand, you know, boom. And I'd be like, you know, and I'd let you go and then you just sink. And so I grab you, I go, oh, you know, and then lift you back up. And like, at what point do you like, you have to sit and watch like your child just drowned, you know? Mm-hmm. And I remember her expressing that. This was like after I was in recovery and it just hitting me like, you know, like a ton of bricks, right? When all the emotions start coming, right? And, but no, when she said it at the first time, it was just kind of like, that's not, you know, I didn't have the capacity to even receive any of that information, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So at this point I'm like, you know, getting some days together, I'm starting to feel comfortable in my skin. You know, this obsession that was normally like riddled me, you know, like if I had $20 in my pocket, all my fingernails would be gone. I'd be like biting them off, like scheming, like how am I going to get like $5 more so that I can boom and get to this place and be back here before someone, you know, this whole scheming thing. And it was incessant, right? That was something that had never left me. And I remember it was about like 2 months into this process at that time that, I had looked back and realized that I hadn't had that. I was like, whoa, like it'd been a couple days. And I remember that just being like like such a gnarly experience to know that wasn't it. I don't even know how to like explain that.
It sounds like that's a relief.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that you're not tied to something that was dragging you down for years, that you released it.
Yeah.
That right there is amazing, because that was one of my questions that I wanted to ask, is that you were talking about how the drugs affected your brain and how it blocked certain things out, and it was like it was a necessity in your life.
Right.
You know, so every day you were needing to do a drug to give you that feeling.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you don't need that drug.
Right. Now I was getting these feelings, right? Getting my needs met, right? Very crucial needs of being seen, of being honest and being open, and being, that there was no blame and no judgment, that I could show up, and that I was surrounded by people who had gone through a similar situation, and had experience, strength, and hope to share with me, right? That they had a way out, and then I started like seeing some of these like, gifts coming, and I'm realizing this is very much like a live process, and my connection with, my spiritual connection was growing, and this was like a huge part of it, right? So gratitude's coming. Now I'm starting to notice like, little synchronicities that are happening with the people that I'm meeting all seem to be kind of coming into my life at the right time. And everything starts to like make sense and be like this beautiful, like, mosaic and play that is like turning into this beautiful picture, and this came from like such confusion and such like, I had no idea. And I remember like first getting sober and feeling like everyone had it figured out. And I'd be like my brain didn't work. I'm like, it's so like confusing, right? There was just so much. And there was kind of this like relaxing into like a deeper knowing, in practicing a lot of the work that they showed me to do, and ultimately it's a spiritual process. I had to find something, bigger and greater than myself that I could, turn my will over to, and that.
Well, it's also interesting, before we get into the spiritual, aspect of it, it is really interesting that a group of men were able to connect with you. I heard it said here not too long ago, an addict that I was listening to on another podcast, who's been sober for over 20 years, said that people that aren't addicted don't understand and can't talk to a person that is addicted, whether it's alcohol or drugs or whatever, because it doesn't resonate, because they don't speak the same language. It sounds like that there's truth behind that.
Yeah. I tell you that like, some of the things, that I did and that happened, and like I express it to normal people and they're like, that's insanity. Like, why would you ever do that? I mean, like really bad things. And, I can bring that to them and they go, yeah, oh yeah. Like they're like, and right. So it's this idea of like, welcome, like home, dude, you know what I mean? Like you're okay. You are like whole as you are. It's just getting you to now like see that. Right. And that's a huge part. And I need to have someone that has gone through that to understand that. Right. Like to really know and be like, oh dude, 100%. So there's this connection. And I feel like there's a connection and I can feel that they've been there. They understand, they truly viscerally know in their body what that feels like. Right. And so like automatically I have like this undying trust. Right. And, a sense of camaraderie that never fades, right?
Right.
It's like,
right. Yeah. Like I have, in me, I feel like if it were up to me to have that type of conversation with you, I would inadvertently, not purposely, but downplay what you were going through because I wouldn't understand it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been there. Right. I wouldn't know the difficulties. I wouldn't know. I don't know what it's like to face death.
Yeah.
And then have something so powerful, a pull so powerful that the very next day I'd go back and do it again.
Oh, yeah.
So I can't.
Yeah.
I can't fathom.
Yeah.
Where you were at. So it would make it impossible for me to have that conversation with you, come on, man, let's go get clean. Because I'm thinking, come on, man, we'll just go to the hospital. They're going to, put you in a bed for a couple of days.
Yeah.
And all's going to be good. We'll go surfing.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. But I don't think that unless you have been through it, you can understand it. And if you can't understand it, it's, I had a woman tell me years and years ago, that, I was going through some hard times. And she said, Michael, going through hard times, it's difficult, but it is the only way that you will be able to have empathy for other people that are going through hard times. So you almost have to go through the hard time to have empathy for the person that's going through it. And so, and everybody's hard times are different. Yours, I think, really takes a village of people that have been there and understand it before they can.
Totally. Yeah, the empathy and sympathy, right?
Yeah.
There's like two distinctions. But yeah, having a community, right, that you can like feel a part of, and they talk about, addiction science may one day like fix it, right? Whatever that looks like, I don't know. But the reality is like, the solution that I found has been working with other men and who've gone through a similar thing.
I think it's because one of the things that you would keep coming back to in your story of where you were at is about feelings.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what science is going to do, how they're going to come up and they're going to emulate feeling. But I think that that's where the strength of other people come in, is that other people that have experienced what you've experienced, and maybe even experienced worse, but, have the feeling and can display that feeling, which will then, I think, give you that sense of trust that, hey, these people understand me.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Having that trust is a huge foundation, for me to be able to, that's a big part. Like, if I'm talking to others that might be struggling or might be, going into that, I talk about the details, of how it was, so that they can have that feeling too. Like, hey, this person knows how it was, they've obviously been through this same thing, similar, maybe worse. And, there's hope, right? So that gives you like this idea that, there's hope, because it's very easy to feel hopeless, right?
Oh, I can imagine.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, this person did it. Like, how can I, and first there was, cause I came in and out, like of trying this thing and not really applying myself and having that dedication and surrender to begin with. But it was, I wanted to do things my way, and I wasn't really, I saw the differences in all of these people's stories, right? I never looked at those like similarities. And I think a big part of that surrender was being like having the humility to like really apply it, and not only have the willingness to do that, but then start seeing in their, story and in their experience, like a hope for myself. Like, man, this can, maybe I can do this,
Maybe really do this thing, huh?
Yeah. And I remember this one moment of like, I was in a bathroom and I like was like moving across and I saw like a slight, I saw myself in the mirror, like slightly, like just like a very split second. And there was this weird feeling that came over me. And it was like this idea that for the very first time, like I saw someone that didn't use drugs and alcohol, that wasn't like, that didn't identify with that, like this new person that was emerging. And almost as quickly as it happened, it vanished, but there was like this really beautiful sense of self that kind of like, of seeing this like new person. Right. And, a beautiful thing, today is like the people that I have in my life have like never seen, a lot of that person, and like that there's, it's such like a beautiful thing. Like people that, they have kids and they're like, my daughter has never known that part of me, has never seen that. And it's like such a beautiful thing. But you get to hear those stories as well when you're like around a group of people and,
So when you're recovering now, in the first stages, you're there for, you're around your group for a couple months. How long did it take you before you realized this is the real deal, and I'm not going to backslide?
Yeah,
and I'm really got a chance here, and I'm not going to fuck it up.
Yeah.
So how long did it take you to get to that point?
Yeah. So when I was telling you about like that moment that I realized that, man, I hadn't been obsessing, right? They talk about the obsession, right? The obsession to use and to drink. And I'd been praying like, you know, please God relieve me of this like obsession, you know, and I would pray about it every day. And then I realized, and it would like been a couple of days after that. And so that was like a big, like something's different here, you know, like obviously like my actions and everything and my willingness was like different and I was experiencing things, but that's like when it really became like real, you know? And I was like, dang, this is like the obsession has been lifted. Like they're talking about, you know what I mean? And like, maybe this is happening for me too, you know? And then just me being present, like a bunch of beautiful things happen. You know, I started getting jobs and I would just literally show up to the job and like, they'd be like, oh my God, they'd start giving me like promotions and all these more responsibilities and like all these cool things started happening. And I was like, what is going on? I'm literally just like now like showing up for life. It seemed like bare minimum, you know what I mean? It seems like I'm just like here and present. Really, I was doing a lot of this work and I know that I evoked a lot of that energy and like the things that I was doing. But, you know, just beautiful things started to happen in my life, you know, meeting people and connecting at a heart level, you know, like, I love the people, you know, that I've met that has to, you know, a big part of that connection has to do with just like that clarity that I had, you know, in my own heart. And, you know, so all these like really beautiful things are happening and I'm just like, it's a new life, right? It feels like a completely new, like I'm living life for the first time.
And how long after you first started did you start noticing this? A couple months, 3 months, 6 months, you know, a year?
Yeah.
You know, when was it really like really showing itself to you that, you know, that this is my new world?
Yeah, about I mean, I would say about like I think 6 months would probably be like the big, you know, like understanding like, okay, like there's something real here. And then when I got that first year, like, wow, you know, I was like, this is wild. 1 year that was like unthinkable, you know? And so I don't know if there was like a definitive point, like where I knew, but I was just like realizing that all these things are happening, you know, and I'm starting to have a life and I'm starting to be a member of society, you know, and I mean, I'm starting to like feel like a man and feel like I'm holding my weight, you know, and I still suffer with like a lot of the, you know, shame and stuff that's still from like my past, you know, and that showed itself in like my relationships and things like that. But there's, you know, honest communication and about that to people and like kind of working, you know, starting this process of, you know, the work, as we say, like it's, you know, situational and it's moment to moment and it's being in practice and being intentional in the moment, you know, with who I am, what I want, and really understand, like aligning with that, you know.
Hey, I didn't even think about that until you just said that too. The shame of who you were, what you were, how you did it, what you did with your life in that span of time. That's got to be really heavy on your mind, on your heart.
Totally. Yeah. So like during the whole, you know, newly in recovery, there's still so much of that. You know what I mean? It's like you're starting to see. Obviously, you've stopped, you know, using or drinking, and now like things are happening and things are like being good, but there's still the you problem, right? There's still all this stuff. And so it's still very much chaotic. It's not just like downhill, you know what I mean? There's a lot of uncomfortability, but there's a lot of like working through it and having that hope and doing so. And that never really like stops. Like that continues to go, right? You just deepen more into this sense of like, feeling more sure of myself, you know, diving deeper.
I would imagine it would be also too a sense or a feeling of worthiness, you know, and you know, when good things are starting to happen to you and then you're looking back at your history and you have shame about the history, but you see good things happening. Am I worthy of this? You know, that's a hurdle. I mean, there are people that have gone through a quarter of what you've experienced that still, if good things happen in their life, they're not feeling worthy of it. So I can't imagine, you know, how you dealt with taking the good things in your life, and accepting the good things, and not feeling guilt for that because you're not feeling worthy.
Oh, that's there. And I would, you know, put my foot in my mouth all the time. You know, when's the next shoe going to drop, right? I lived a lot of that time still like, okay, things are going good. Like what's going to go bad, right? Like, cause that's like what I deserve, or that's just like how it goes. And that's just me. Right. You know? And, so it's this continuous, constant, like I don't know, battle or struggle, but just process and journey of like, acknowledging those things, right? Breathing through them, you know, and being honest about them with the people that you're most intimate and close with, you know, and there's still today, like, when I'm being like intentional with my life and my energy and my process, like I am creating such worthiness and so much love and so much like just freedom. But when I'm not being intentional, say I'm getting, too much social media or whatever have you, and like I'm kind of drifting away from that process, like I get into the same things, right? These are I'm still human, like, and I'm like not rid of a lot of this stuff. So I can very much go into that, dang, like what's wrong with me? Or like, I'm not feeling worthy of this, or like a fear of, being loved, or fear of success, right? Or fear of like a lot of these things. And,
which are actually, like you said, those are human
right.
feelings, and everybody, regardless of their history, will feel those from time to time. Oh, yeah. They go through them. I go through them.
Yeah.
Am I worthy of this? Is this going right?
Yeah.
Why does Jill love me as much as she does? Am I really worthy of that? What do I? So, it is all part of the human psyche to not feel as though the things that are happening well in your life are always deserved.
But I do have a direct correlation. Like when I am on purpose and I am doing the things I know that keep me connected and keep me present, like I receive, I know that I am worthy, and I'm able to reciprocate that love and reciprocate that affection and that connection. And it's the ebb and flow. And I'm so grateful for that, just that awareness of those things, right? Because I could very, very well not be, I'm constantly manifesting no matter what. I'm constantly creating situations and things in my life, whether I'm, aware of them or not. So when I am being aware and I am, actively like working towards those, I'm creating like so much more, and that's like something that I learned, like, from these men and from the people in my life, that I love watching them go through, everyone's got their process in handling that, and, we get to lift each other up and we get to show that part of ourselves. And that's why I love having, conversations with some of my loved ones, and we get to see each other and express that, and like small talk's hard, man. I don't know, I want to talk about trauma, I want to talk about like what's really going on, right? Like tell me how it's, tell me what it's like. And and I know you do too, and I love that. This is great. Like being able to come here and talk about this is just so beautiful.
Well, I think that the story is so important for, a lot of different people and people on different levels and people have different experiences. This is a real life story. This is about failure. It's about experiences that other people hopefully will never experience, and yet it's also about hope and dreams and success too. I mean, and that's what it is, and it's all embodied in one young man that has experienced so much in his life so early on. And it's and that's like the next phase of our conversation too, is getting into the positive parts of your life today, But before we do that, I got to go pee.
I second that.
Okay, we're back, man. Thank you. One question I had for you is, okay, you're sober, you're in a good group of people, you're feeling good about yourself, you're feeling good about your progress. Mom and dad, how long did it take for them to trust that this was the real deal, that they didn't have to,
right,
worry about you anymore? Now they're looking at you and they're looking forward to seeing you and coming over to the house and a different person. How long did it take for them to believe that it was going to be real?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's a big part of a big part of it. There's like an increment. Some people say like allot them 1 month or 3 months for every year you were out or something like that, like to be like to build back the trust and all this stuff. And that wasn't necessarily the case for me. I think that it was very clear something was different, especially after getting like that first year or whatever, and I mean, it was pretty apparent, I became like a pillar in the family. Like it brought us all way closer together, like and this is one thing, like the sense that you never want anyone to kind of go through this scenario. And that was kind of our take. It's like, I really hope like we never go through it again, or like that anyone doesn't, but I'm so glad that we did, right? So grateful that like, that I was still alive, and I got to show up this like open-hearted man for them, and for my family, and it brought us closer together. And
a little sister that you really hadn't got to know yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And there's such a big, big age difference between me and my little sister, and I got to like show up, and she'd be like, this is like the first time she's been able to like look up to me, and it's like a really beautiful thing to then be present for like your family, be present for the people that you love and are surrounded by, and that love you. And, so I think for them, if I was going to give like a time limit, it was definitely within like that first year to like right after that first year, where they were like, okay, like this is not only do we not have to worry about him, but like, wow, and my mom is my number one fan, and she used to, talk with a lot of the nurses that she worked with. They knew all of the stuff that went on, I actually ended up on my mom's unit one time after like a gnarly psychosis thing that happened. I ended up in the hospital. I almost lost my finger. I had like a gnarly like blood infection that was like almost to my heart, which would have been really bad. That was madness. I'm not going to get into that, but I was on the same unit. And so like, and I remember they're like, oh, this is your son, like, wow. And they know everything, right? She's like vented to them about all this stuff, and, it would be like the next thing, he OD'd, or he's in jail, or like he showed up and, snuck into the house and was like hiding in the closet, and telling them all this stuff. And, now, at that point she was like, now when they ask like how I'm doing, she just like smiles. She just like, sit down, like, let me tell you how my son's doing, like, and just so freaking proud, And,
well, when you think about your life up until that point, starting at 11 years old, aside from your parents being able to look at you with some pride, nobody was.
Yeah.
You never really felt that. You never really had that. Yeah, you had people looking up to you because you could do a lot of drugs, or you were the the party guy, or whatever. Whole different thing. But for people to really look at you as a man that has an open heart and a good soul, you never experienced that.
No. Yeah. Like a false sense of pride, like building whatever that like elusive, thing is. They talk about it being like feeling like a God-sized hole, right? This like filling out this like sense of self, and having them be proud of me, being proud of myself, right? Self-esteem and pride, and that's a big difference, being a man in the world, and being able to feel like I have a place, and that I'm respected, and I'm one, I'm valuable, I'm worthy. It's so subtle and maybe overlooked, but just so powerful, especially coming from a place where it was so void of hope and love for myself, and
oh, absolutely. And you look at where you're at, and you're saying it took your parents about a year, a little over a year, develop that trust and that belief, and that everything is good. And so you're sober for a year, and you're working, and kind of developing and creating a life. It had to have seemed surreal to you that a year earlier you're sleeping at the park.
Yeah.
And now a year later, you're sober. You've got a good group of people and friends around you. You've got a family that loves you and is open arms to you. And you're working, and it's got to seem just surreal.
It's a beautiful thing, and then, and then I get to share about that stuff with the men, and the new people coming up, that are, got like a little bit less time, maybe like still struggling, telling my story, and then being able to share with them, like, these are the gifts that I've gotten, and these are this is like what life can be, and to be able to like really express that in a way that's like personal to me, to them, so that they can acknowledge and hear that and get a little bit of hope,
right.
Is very important, right, to the process. But yeah, it felt very good. That was like, things weren't easy, right? There's still a lot of issues and a lot of problems and things that come up, and a lot of obstacles and fear and like resentment and these things that like chop up. But the reality is that like, wow, like here I am, like participating in life. It was so weird. It was like a whole new, mind you, like I started drinking when I was 11, right? I never like emotionally matured. I never had like the, go to prom and like go get your first job and like do all this stuff that like I feel like normal, I don't know normal people are, but like what other people that I know did. And so here I am, like I'm like, whoa, I have a job, people trust me. They gave me a vehicle, they gave me a company credit card, I'm like, what the hell is happening? Like, don't you know who I am? Like there was a very surreal like imposter syndrome that would happen where I'd be like, man, like who are you seeing? Like I'm still struggling to see this person that you guys all see, and that was very much the process of like those first few years, is like really seeing who it was that these people loved, and like being able to witness that and seeing like little moments like in situations that mirrored back to me, and to start really embodying that and feel that, so that's definitely what those like first few years were like.
Oh, it had to be just an incredible feeling in a lot of ways. I mean, the reality of it is, you up until that point didn't know what it was like to be sober as an adult. I mean, you started so young; you were just a child, and growing through your formative years, and like you said, all the experiences and proms and all the different things that other people were doing. You never experienced that. Now all of a sudden you find yourself in your early 20s for the first time. Yeah. Clear-headed.
Totally.
Yeah.
And showing up for life. Yeah. And so I was, it was very much like a new thing for me. And like I said, there was, then I got a great, job, where I met Steven, and we got really close, and that was like the first time that I started getting close to like other people outside of like those men, right? And building like strong connections with these people, and like really enjoying life and feeling like I have something to give, right? They only know this new person of me, and what they like me. Whoa, this is cool, and they're so awesome, and I love them, and they like me too, and this is really weird, and so it's like situations like that of like over and over again feeling valuable and feeling, like a part of, is like really, really beautiful,
right?
And then like opportunities keep coming, and as I keep showing up with an open heart, like I get met with grace, and things weren't easy, and there was a lot of hard times, but I had support, and I was honest and open, and it was just such like a beautiful like spiritual expansion into my life, Exactly. And I got to see it mirrored back in like all these scenarios. I got the opportunity to move to Portland, and work, and I loved that, like going somewhere else and being like my own person. I don't know, I was just very much in love with this idea of like living my life, and
So it's okay. So it would be just the perfect time right now to say this has been a great story, and I really appreciate you being here and sharing it. Yeah. But there's more to the story.
Oh, it never stops.
Never stops. Yeah. So you're sober for a number of years now, and you've really worked on yourself, and things are going good, and you're working. You've got friends, and you've got family. Yeah. Tell us what happened.
Yeah. So there's with all of the good, there was still a lot of stuff that I struggled with, and I was able to deal with a lot of the stuff like day to day on life's terms, and communicate, and I felt plugged in, and I was still making that very much like a priority of mine, and then over time I definitely did like shy away, a lot of the gifts and things that I had gotten in my life, like as a direct result of doing a lot of the work and working on myself, I kind of made priority, like slowly these things kind of, it seemed less like important to throw myself into that like on a daily basis, and I kind of felt like, I'm pretty good. Like I've got this job, I've been able to make money for myself, I feel secure. I'm not like a raging lunatic, and there was a very long process for me of like kind of like pulling away from this process to which I had known so deeply, this, these few years of being sober, and, it would happen in ebbs and flows of like, not feeling as connected, and then doubling down and making the intention and like to get reconnected, moving to Portland away from my, support was like hard. And so I like really had to like step out of my comfort zone into a new set of people, like in person to like be with and to communicate a lot of this stuff. And, I wasn't able to really like build a huge foundation up there, but, things were still good, things weren't like going haywire, and, I still kept in touch with a lot of the men that I, had initially done a lot of the work with. And, I ended up moving back here, and that was like January 2020, and we all know what happened then, and it was like this, really big shift in like everything in my life, and I wasn't as plugged in as like I hadn't been these years, right? I kind of use the innuendo we talk about of like, I threw in the towel, 6/2/15, I threw in the towel and was like, please God, like help me, I'll do whatever it is, anything,
Mm-hmm.
And over the years I like took little pieces back of that towel, kind of cutting them off. Take
Mm-hmm.
this back, I take that, and my one of the men in particular that was like really influential in my life passed away in 2020, and he was a pillar within the community, such a beautiful man. He died sober. He was a successful alcoholic. That's what we call,
Mm-hmm.
you died sober, right? That's you graduated, you did it. And he did. And I didn't really feel the necessity to like go and get a new one right away. Like a lot of people, like somebody that is like really close to me, like I just didn't have that person that knew everything, right? That one person I like really confided in. And, it's definitely recommended that you go and find that,
That seemed like that would be a hard thing to do. It's like you're replacing somebody. And I think anybody would find that challenging. Somebody's just passed away, big part of your life, confidant, somebody that, you're accustomed to talking to and opening up with, and all of a sudden something happens and they're gone.
Yeah.
And, I'm going to go find a new one. It's not like it's a
Right.
commodity.
Yeah.
So.
Especially like me at this point, not being as plugged in as I normally was, so it didn't really seem as like pressing at the time, so it was definitely something, that I could have just like put more effort and energy into, but it was just that was just like more of a symptom of me, feeling like I kind of have things like pretty under wraps, things are pretty locked down. I'm like doing pretty good, and, so, I didn't really do that, and I continued to stay, and I'd be like, man, it's been like a while since I've like reached out to these people, not a lot of people know like kind of what I'm doing, and to like update, I, just further and further pulled away, and then on top of that, like I wasn't really like, enlarging my spiritual life. I wasn't, like praying as much or connecting, with God. I wasn't having all those like little things happen, these people, places, things like coming into my life in such like a unison and like beautiful way. I wasn't like, man, that was crazy that this happened. Like all these little synchronicities. And I didn't really even notice that like wasn't happening, but slowly I'm like distancing myself from this, entire thing. And there's very much a part of my process where I was, knowing that like, hey, I should be like being more plugged in and doing the work, but like, I'm okay right now, like why go the extra mile? Like I got to work, like I got to do all this other stuff, and things. And, just like a lot of the beautiful things that I got from doing this, like I've kind of like put in the way in some sense, and, so it was definitely really hard to like feel that. And there was a part of me that felt like I was like lacking something, but at the same time, I like looked at my life and I was like, I'm not like an asshole. I'm not like maybe like I don't really need this, maybe I don't need to stay as like plugged in or be a part of like a community like that, And I started like feeling a little bit ungrateful for that sense of like community that I had. I was like, why do I have to, I was like very selfish. Like, why do I have to stay connected in order to somehow like feel better? Like, why do I have to continue maintaining all this stuff so that, I'm watching all these other people, which, from the outside, I'm comparing my insides to their outsides. Right. And they seem to kind of have it all together, and, I just like kind of strayed, a little bit away, and things were going well for like a while. And it was a very slow and insidious process, but, the pandemic happened. It was hard to find in person, like places for us to like meet and all be like together. And, so a lot of times we'd like meet on like Zoom and things like that, which was like really difficult for me to like, feel connected to people like staring at a laptop,
Right. Yeah.
Which was like really, kind of struggled with, but, slowly my mind started telling me that like, you're good. You're all right, dude. You're totally fine. Like, looking back, it was, very much like I wasn't really talking about this stuff to people too, like that would have been like a key time to be like, hey man, I'm really, feeling like maybe like I don't need to be like working on myself as much and, like have this like daily maintenance type of deal, in the same sense that I had known it.
Yeah, because that definitely would have been a red flag to somebody that standing on the outside
right.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had I been telling it, to that man who passed away, it'd have been like, hey, what's really going on?
Let's meet.
He called me out, and,
yeah.
And, and I think that that's a big part of like, keeping people at arm's distance, right? Like I could have reached out and found someone immediately, had I been more plugged in, that would have been my next step. They would have been like, yo, like, so, find someone else that you can call every day, find someone else that you can meet with, find someone else, and I didn't have that, and I kind of, it almost seems like intentional, right? To kind of like get away from that so that I can, live in my will, right? I love my will. God can materialize himself right now and be like, Daniel, you can have everything that you've ever wanted, more than you could have imagined. You just got to let me do it, and I'd be like, well, let me get like a week. Let me get like one crack at it first before you like put your hands in it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like there's definitely like that self-will, and so slowly I'm thinking that my mind is right, like I'm in a place where I can like will myself to the things that I want, and into the like, slight specifics of like what was going on for me. It was like, I started growing like some hemp plants at the house, it was like a little pandemic project. And I was like, it's just like CBD, it's not like THC or anything like that. Like I'm not going to get high. And it was just like kind of fun, like a fun thing to do. And, I like kind of obsessed on like those plants, man. It was definitely like something that I like really enjoyed doing, and no one's like worried about it. They're like, it's Daniel, he's secure. Like he's fine. Like nobody's worrying about, like my mental state or my sobriety and things like that, and I'm doing like whatever I could, if they were like, I wouldn't let them feel that way. You know what I mean? I would like definitely like justify like, oh no, it's chill. Like, you're kidding me? Like, I'm good. This is fine. CBD, blah, 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 whatever. And, so I started like, smoking some of the hemp and stuff, and it was chill. And I wasn't like using it like alcoholically or like a lot, but it's definitely something that I was doing like often, and then I started finding like CBD gummies and stuff. And so I was like taking those, like there would be like sleep and CBD. So I'd take them to go to sleep. Then I started finding like 5 to 1, like 3 to 1, like THC a little bit. And then I'd start taking like little pieces of that, like micro dosing, right? Like before I go to bed. And it's just like open these floodgates where like, if you were to step back, like you're insane, mm-hmm. What happens when this, when you partake in these things, like why would you even start that process? Right. But in my thinking, right, that like insidious, like slow, like just like chipping away, like, oh, pull away from here. You don't really need that. Like over time, like this, and then I'm not like expressing, I'm not talking about any of this stuff. Nobody has any idea that this is going on, and, it's just a progressive thing, and, that's just like part of the, part of the process is that like, it slowly progresses, and in my head, I'm like, oh, dude, I'm totally fine. I'm like, this is fine. And then I started like microdosing like mushrooms, cause that's like a big thing. So I was doing like very small amounts of like mushrooms to like feel, like go through the day and stuff to like try. And then that started kind of happening a little bit more, but then I'd like stop for a little bit. I'd be like, oh, I can take it and leave it, like, dude, and so the big thing for me is cause like I was like totally fine with what was going on at this point. I didn't talk to anyone about it, but I was like, I feel like this is just kind of a new chapter in my life. I'm watching all these other people that are around me, like, recreationally use these things and drink like with impunity, right? Like nothing's happening to them. They're like totally fine, and I'm like, dude, like I think I'm okay. Like, I think I'm good, And so I was just like totally conscious free. I'm still not telling anyone about it, right?
Right. Because
right.
Something, I'm not talking to anybody about this because,
totally. Right.
Yeah.
And, but in my mind, I'm creating this scenario so that I can like, just keep going. You know what I mean? Like if I tell someone, then they're gonna make me stop. And it's like, and it's like, at the time I didn't really like understand that, I wasn't like aware of that, but I'm just like,
so that we're clear. So people that are listening to this is now how many years sober before this is starting?
This is almost 7 years sober.
Okay.
Where this like started. Well, 2020 when I grew the thing, when I started doing like the CBD and stuff like that, that was like 5 years, I guess. 2022, yeah, 2015, yeah. So like 5 years, and then it was like into that, and so like at the end of like my 6th year, it's like I'm like starting to like microdose these little bits of the THC and stuff, and I'm not telling anyone about it, and and it's definitely like growing, and it's something like in the back of my mind I'm thinking about. I'm like, dang, that's like not good, but I think I'm just like in a new place. This is a new chapter. Like, I think I can,
so there's absolutely zero fear on your part that this is going to lead to something further.
There was in my mind that was not at all the case. I'm like, there's no way. Yeah. There's no way it's going to like lead to something more.
Yeah.
That wasn't even in my thought process. It was just like, oh, this is like totally fine. Just make sure that this is like not getting out of hand, like what you're doing. You know what I mean? Like, no, it's fine. I'd think about it. I'd be like, dude, it's been a while. Like I haven't thought about it. So like, I'm good. I'm not like obsessing on it. Right. Like I had known like my process to be when it came to like substances and stuff. And, it all kind of came to a head, after some time. We went to Mexico. We went to Mexico on like a little surf trip, and we went down there, and I was kind of feeling like a little antsy. I was feeling definitely like I kind of noticed that I was, spotting things. I'd go down there, and we were in Rosarito, and I started seeing like the pharmacies and stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, I remember, because I used to go across the border all the time, and we used to get a lot of stuff, and I'm like, yeah, that's where I'd go, and I was like, oh, and there's that guy right there, definitely, I could like find something to that guy, so my mind's already kind of working, and the wheels are spinning, and it was totally like normal day other than that. And then we get back up to Long Beach, and it was that next day, and it just kind of hit me. I was like, I had made the decision in my mind that I was going to use like my drug of choice, and once I made that decision, it just like my body took control. It was like I already felt like sick, I already felt like everything in my body, and I was like, it's gonna happen, I'm doing it. And it was like from there it was just downhill. Like it felt like so normal, and just so like it's like that I hadn't had all this time, right? It was almost just like right back, maybe even worse than it was, this like feeling. And I was successful in obtaining those things, and not 30 minutes after that, I'm realizing what's happening by the context the EMT is giving me, by the questions he's asking. And I'm so confused as to what just happened, and I don't know. I'm like barely everything sounds weird, and they're expressing to me, and I realize that like I overdosed and I almost died, and I was in such disbelief. It was I wasn't answering any of their questions because they just kept asking me a question, and then it would just keep hitting me like, wow, what the fuck, They're like, you're on your last breath. They see it all day. They're very much like, one of the guys was like, what did you see? Like, were you dreaming? Like, what kind of stuff? I always like to ask, if you like saw anything afterwards. And I'm just like, I'm not answering any questions. I'm like, you're kidding me. And as they're shutting the doors, I like see my roommate, my friend Christina, and she's like in tears. She's staring at me, and I realized like, wow. So that happened pretty quick. It was very, very much like a expedited like lesson for me. I thank the guy. I'm like, thank you. They'd hit me with multiple doses of Narcan. Thank God. They busted my window. They pulled me out through the window. Thank God someone found me. If any little thing would have gone a little bit different, like I wouldn't be here. It's crazy that like that I'm still alive. Went to the hospital, and everyone rallied around me. It was pretty wild. And I'm definitely not used to that. I'm, like in terms of like getting sober or like, having like being like new, right? Like starting over type of deal. It's been weird having like so many people in my corner, right? Because usually when you get sober, like at least for me, how it was, like there was no one left, everyone was gone. Like that was a wrap. It's wild to think that happened, but the reality is that like it was supposed to happen that way. You know what I mean? And it happened kind of perfectly, because maybe had that not, been the case and I just kept going, like I probably would have died anyway, but I also would have brought everyone down with me, it was like, I've been having this thought of like getting like plugged in again, and like going back into this, to what I know is like a beautiful life, and I kind of strayed from that and was like, oh, maybe, and I'd go, but I didn't have that same fruition, that same like earnestness to like want to really dig in, and this was that. Gigs up, dude, like here we are,
So you're sober for 5 years. You start growing hemp. You lose your friend. You got a couple years of growing the hemp, smoking a little bit of it, microdosing a little THC, microdosing a little bit of mushroom, slow progression. And then this happens. Then death comes knocking at the door again. And by the grace of God, you escape.
Yeah.
And put you where at? Where does this put you as far as, your family who rallied around you, girlfriend rallied around you, everybody's there. Everybody had such a belief in you, had such trust in you that this was it and they were never going to have to worry about this again, and all of a sudden this happens, bam, and it's like, okay, now what? Where's your frame of mind at? I mean, because now not only, I think in listening to you, a lot of this also has to do with your trust and faith in yourself too, because now you got to start all over. Now you got to prove it to yourself again. And, where you had this big length of time. Yeah. So where does that put you?
Yeah. So that was, it's been so weird, coming back into the fold, and
I think, and if it's all right with you, we need to, at least for the people that are hearing this, that this was recent.
Yeah, this is very recent.
Yeah. This wasn't like a couple years ago.
No, this was like a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So this is like pretty fresh, and it's like really like surreal, talking about it. And I'm still very much like, sticking away too much. I don't want to get caught up too much in the story of like what it was,
Right.
But the reality is like I know exactly, where I messed up. It's very clear, it's very apparent, right? Hindsight's 20/20. But me coming in, reemerging, it's not starting over, right? The time, right? Whatever the date is, may have changed, but the reality is like there's still so much there, all that time's not lost. Right. So it's still very much there, but, this is like a key to me being like, all right, like I freaking strayed away, I rested on my laurels. I, wasn't honest and, transparent with what was going on with me. And this is what happened, and it was potentially a very expensive lesson to learn. Right. But I've been able to like re-immerse myself in such a beautiful way. And it doesn't look like how it did when I first came, in, and when I first like really took all this stuff, and ran with it, like the recovery journey. But, it's beautiful, and in terms of like my family and friends, like it's a really scary thing, it's very scary. Especially like for my parents, like that opens up a whole can of like, trauma from them, right? Like, and, so it's been a huge test on everyone, and a lot of the people that I've have in my life, have never known that part and never known anything like that happening to people that they're close to. And, that's, it's kind of new. It's a very traumatic experience to go through, and, I find myself like also holding space for those people as well, in this process. And, and they all rallied around me. There were so many people that was like coming and just like staying the night and like coming over to the house and just like hugging me and surrounding me, with love. And it's like a really, really beautiful thing, and there's definitely a part of me that was like, oh my God, what, so many people, this is so much, and then I realized that it's like people love me today,
Well, it was earned.
Right.
You earned it. You earned it during all those years of sobriety and reinventing yourself and pushing forward and allowing yourself to change and allowing yourself to be this new person.
Yeah.
A lot of people, rallied around you because of pure love.
Yeah.
And we were going to have this podcast prior to this incident happening.
Right.
I had talked to Steven about it, and he talked to you, and we were going to put this podcast together.
Yeah.
And the shock, I guess, is the best way to put it, when I heard what had happened.
Yeah.
But the shock quickly dissipates, and it turns to worry. And it turns to concern, and it concerns to, is he good? Is he fine? It's all good. Okay.
And so like making sure not to like just try and like reassure people, like really hold that space for them. And like, like it's scary, and it's wild, and I know that it's like a lot, cause there's a part of me that just wants to like patch up and be like, no, it's, it's fine. It's okay. Like it's going to be, but the reality is like, it's very much a reality, right?
Yeah.
This is a daily thing. This is an ongoing process. And so long as I am taking the next right indicated step, and I am immersing myself in living intentionally, like I said earlier, like my life is a freedom and beauty and worthiness. And when I'm not doing that and I'm not being intentional, I'm pulling away from a lot of these like core things that I know make me, more full. That's what's out there waiting for me. Right. I have a voice in my head that is trying to kill me, and as long as I can live right here and not up here, like we're not only good, we're golden, but,
right. So let me ask you this, as a friend of yours, and and Steven, who's here, watching the podcast, what would you say to those of us that love you as a friend can do to help you through your process from here until you're 90?
Yeah.
What is it that we can look for? Because you got to remember, we're on the outside of all of this and we don't really understand the whole process. We don't understand what's going through. But, as people that love you, what can they do? What can they do to help you through the day-to-day?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's come up, because it's like, people love me and they want to help, they come in like, what can I do? And it's like, I don't know, I don't know. I'm just like, I know what works for me, and ultimately like the best support is to just, be as like open with, you know, your own emotions as possible, like the things that you go through day to day, creating a space that like is, you know, warrants like just connectivity, you know, like checking in, you know, having those people where it's like, you know, from this, like I've gotten a lot closer to a lot of the people that are in my life, right? Similar to how like it kind of went with my family, you know, when I first got sober. You know, it's happened now. Like there's such a deep like connection that has like come from this. So I think the biggest way to support is to just like be as open-hearted as possible and to show up. You know, there's nothing that I need from anyone, you know, but what I treasure now are those like moments that we get to have together, you know, real moments.
Open heart, also open conversation.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, for me, going through life, it's always nice to go through life with people that don't have a lot of problems, aren't sharing a lot of problems, aren't talking to you about a lot of stuff, you know. But on the other side of that too, when you talk to people and they're coming at you and, you know, they're, oh yeah, my life's great. My life's perfect. My life's when it may or may not be.
Yeah.
But then those of us that do struggle through life and do have, you know, certain things, we like to hear real.
Yeah.
You know, we like to hear, at least I do. I like to hear when people need advice or when they're going through something, because it makes me feel like, okay, I'm pretty normal.
Right.
I'm pretty normal because this is kind of like what everybody else is dealing with too. Is that kind of part of it that, you know, associated with people that are real, that open up, that share themselves?
Yeah, totally. That people that are open, that are real, you know, that was a big part of like one of the mistakes I made is that I wasn't being real anymore. I wasn't opening up, you know, to like, you know, that's what's so crucial about being in a community of people that have gone through similar things, is that you can talk to them about anything, you know, like open that up. But there was a part of me that identified with all this time that I had, you know, like I can't tell them I'm struggling or that I'm going through this because I have this time. Like I have to represent this. Like I got to carry the message. I got to make sure that, like, you know, hey, if you stay sober, these good things happen. But it's like the reality is like, do we all struggle, right? And it's, you know, and now I've been really noticing like the people that are within that community that like really open up about where they're at and they've got time, you know, and they're like, I'm struggling. Like I need someone, you know, I'm struggling to connect. I'm struggling to, you know, feel valued, or, you know, or I'm starting to think about using, you know, I'm in a real itchy spot. I'm feeling squirrely, you know, and they talk about it and they open up, and that's so just like beautiful, you know, and that was something that I lacked, you know, and so in the same sense of like finding, you know, surrounding myself with people that are going to be, you know, open and honest at gut level with like what's going on with them is like the like biggest, like strongest thing for me, you know?
Right.
And, you know, some really beautiful things have like come from this situation. It's wild to think that that's like, you know, taking a step back, it's like, dude, you like literally did drugs, almost died. Like, how is that like a good thing? You know, like how is this like the bigger play? And it's so weird. It almost, you know, almost don't seem like worthy of it. Right. Like that all these like beautiful things come like right after that, you know, that it's
a reminder.
Yeah.
It is a reminder. It's a reminder of, and I was going to ask you, since that period of time and you've recovered and you're back on track, you know, I was going to ask you, okay, so now what? Where are you? What are you doing? But part of that was just answered. You know, you see it for yourself, the beauty of where you're at, and you saw the beauty of the people that care, the people that love you, the people that are surrounding you, and what they did when they came out. When that happened, you weren't abandoned at all.
No, not at all.
You know, as a matter of fact, it was just the opposite. You were surrounded.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And, you know, so that's, to me, the jumping off point now of from here until you're 90.
Yeah.
You know, this is the jumping off point. This is, you know, this is the new you. You were cured, you were not cured, but you were recovered, and you were sober, and you were doing all these things in this blip. All it did is just put you in a new spot.
Yeah.
That's going to make you stronger, going to make you healthier, going to make you,
Yeah.
you know, all those things. What are you going to do with it?
Undoubtedly, you know what I mean? And the same thing, because I'm reaching out and finding, you know, a lot of people that's part of their story, you know, that's kind of like how it goes, you know, and really reaching out to them, because I kind of felt like in a really weird spot, you know. It wasn't like I went out and lost everything again, you know. It was like I went out like an afternoon, you know, and then came back, and it was like, you know, here I am now in this place. So I'm like talking to people about like, you know, what's it like coming back, you know, and, you know, they tell me, they're like, you know, you didn't lose that time, you know, that's all still there. You know, you just have to like, you're just building upon that now, right? That's not lost. You have like reset your day. But like you did not fail, you know, like, you know, you now have something to offer those people. So in the same way that they're telling me their experience, they're like, oh yeah, you know, that happened to me. You know, I had 10 years and I went out, you know, or, you know, this is my fourth 5, you know, type of thing. And, it's a forever process, you know, and, ultimately, like, you know, so long as I'm like following, you know, what I know to be true about myself, like things will work out,
Right.
you know? And I express my story, as that's like been the biggest thing that I'm doing, you know, is like telling my story so that people know and people understand. And then, you know, they can feel like, dang, that's me too, you know, or maybe I'm kind of seeing myself in that same situation. Like maybe I should just go and like get honest and allow people to help, you know? 'Cause ultimately we're playing with our life here, you know,
Yeah.
and, it's really important. So, you know, moving forward for me right now, it's just like, where are my feet at and how can I be like as grateful and loving and, you know, like understanding as possible, you know, for my process, for the people around me, and just get back into it. And it's, you know, there's a part of me that's like, dang, like I really wish I just did this before, you know, like before going through all that stuff, you know, it all had to happen the way that it was supposed to. But, you know, people are asking me like, hey, how you doing? And I'm like, well, you know, I'm using all the tools. I'm doing everything that I know, like, it gives me a life like that I adore, you know? And so like life is good. You know, I'm doing
Right.
A, B, and C. Like there's no other thing, you know, it's like, I know exactly what I wasn't doing and like what I'm doing now. And it feels good, you know?
Right.
And things aren't, you know, always easy, right? Going through things, but there's like much more of a grace, you know, when I'm able to do it. Like,
And I know that you probably, due to your experiences and your recovery and in the process that you work on to keep yourself, you know, on the right path, it's kind of keep your feet grounded. Mm-hmm. You know, live for the day, live for the moment, live for whatever. But still being human, you still have your dreams,
yeah,
your hopes, your things for the future. How do you see yourself? What is your next healthy endeavor? What are you looking at?
Yeah. I mean, for me is to, you know, like really get back into that work and to really get vulnerable again and, you know, start surrounding myself and injecting those things into my life, you know, feeling more into my body, feeling more into like the man that I can be, you know, really working on like intimacy and connection and, you know, just filling out this like sense of self, you know. I've kind of slacked on that for a while, you know, that wasn't priority. And now it is. And it's like, there's so much of like a momentum and an inspiration to then continue that, that all I really wish to do is to just continue diving deep and connecting with others, you know, that's like on a soul basis, on like an emotional basis. Like I really, you know, doing this podcast, like, you know, talking to you, like being with my loved ones, in terms of like my own emotional and mental health, like that's, you know, what I want, you know, I want to walk through this life, like, as a man, an open-hearted one, you know, and, you know, I have a beautiful girlfriend. She's an amazing human being. And I'm like, very grateful and looking forward to like deepening that intimacy between us, you know, deepening this like connection that we have like through what, you know, through what we're all going through. And, you know, it's definitely something that I'm just like focusing on where my feet are today. Right. My scope doesn't really exist outside of that currently, you know, and things get real simple, you know, and life gets like real full.
I think that's really important. I think too many of us spend too much time in tomorrow, and we forget about, you know, what's going on today.
Yeah.
In our world, we get caught up, and it's probably like a conversation that, you know, Stephen and I had earlier about ego, and about how the ego pushes us to do better in tomorrow when tomorrow hasn't even got here.
Right.
Because I'm projecting tomorrow what I want to do,
not real.
What isn't even real yet.
Yeah.
And what am I projecting? Why am I doing that? Well, it's because I'm feeling maybe some pressure over here from somebody else that I'm going to try to impress, or you know,
Right.
I want to have more so that they think that I am more successful than I am, or whatever that it all is. You know, tomorrow isn't always the best place to live, and today is what we have. You know, and you know, and you can, if you got your mic on, you can inject too. You know.
Yeah. No, I think that, pardon. I think we all, you know, as just human beings, are left with our own devices, right? And what are you to do with that, especially with no owner's manual, as we talk about, and I think that your story, Dan, is a lot of things that are analogous to maybe struggles that other people have, and of course, what makes your experience yours, and some of the things that you've been through, make it unique to you. But I think what really is most important about you yourself is what he said was your resolve and your trust and your belief in yourself, is probably the most admirable thing that I can, you know, see as I've known you. I would, for sure, not even without hesitation, if I were to grow up in your situation, wouldn't have made it. No way. Not even close. Like, I can barely keep my crap together, like with my own struggles, let alone actually having like a chemical addiction, you know? So I just think like, and again, like when you come to after a situation of falling from grace, if you will, you know, look at all the people around you. Like, that's the testament to your resilience and your will to like see the what's around the corner and know that their better days are ahead. Totally. You know,
and that's you know, coming from one of your closest friends that is looking at you in high regard. That, you know, to take what you have gone through lightly would be the sin, and you don't do that. You look at that and you are very thankful to be where you're at because of where you've been.
Totally.
And while it's hard for those of us that don't experience addiction issues to understand when you say what you have gone through is almost a gift to get you where you're at today. It's hard for us to understand that, but I understand that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, totally.
You know,
it's like what you always say too, like, and I think this is actually pretty on point for everybody to think about too, but you always say like your addiction is, if you're not working on it or actively working to, you know, keep it at bay, it's in the corner doing push-ups, getting stronger. Yeah. And like, that is something we all have our own version of that thing. Right.
Totally.
And I think that you recognizing it and just being open and forthcoming with the people who you know have your best interests at heart.
Yeah.
That's where we like, it takes a village kind of thing.
Totally.
You know?
Yeah. But I mean, the community aspect of it's huge. And no, I mean, it's, you know, from the outside looking in, it's a lot, you know, and I know that, you know, maybe the you know, the listeners, like, knowing that it's like maybe something that they haven't gone through or maybe have been touched by slightly, it is a very like real situation, and it's running rampant, right? Like the number one cause of death for, children, what is it, like
18 to 35?
18 to 35 is fentanyl, right? Fentanyl poisoning, like they're dropping.
Yeah.
And
that's where this podcast, and I really hope that this podcast is one of our podcasts that gets out and reaches a lot of people, because I think it's really an important message to parents with young children.
Yeah.
You have to let children go. You have to allow them the freedom and the space to experience their life and their growth, but also too, going back to what you were talking about, and what I agree with, is that open communication, be able to sit down with them and say, this is
or
our
find
fear.
Someone that they can sit down with and talk about that.
Absolutely. Because the fentanyl problem is way bigger than a lot of us can handle. I mean, it's coming in by the truckloads, and they're finding it in so many different things. I mean, it's not as though you're going to go out and you're just going to buy fentanyl. Yeah, you're going to find it in all kinds of things, right. And it scares me. And we're going to get off Dan for a minute. We're going to start talking about some things in society. It scares me with how open and what would be the word, cavalier we are about talking about drugs in society. When we are hearing on openly people talking about psychedelics. When we talk about, smoking pot, and pot is legal, and I get all of that, and it can be compared to, well, you can go into the liquor store and you can buy a 6-pack of beer, or you can buy scotch or whiskey or vodka. Okay, yeah, those are killers also, and I get that, but how cavalier that we are in our society with drugs of any sort, whether it's alcohol, whether it's pot, whether it's
Right.
Fast food.
Killer.
Here, but seriously, with drugs, how we talk about them in society almost makes it that much more alluring to young people. Like, well, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
And the big deal is that it has a profound effect on some people that, in your case, just,
right.
Couldn't control it.
Totally. I mean, alcohol, fentanyl's killing everyone, but, alcohol kills like a lot of people, whether it be through, like accidents or, car accidents and stuff like that. It's the most damaging on the body, right? It's like literally just like
absolutely
poison, but it's part of our culture,
Yes.
And that's
well, and the whole thing with the drugs too, and people that are smoking pot and it's legal. Well, I'm on the freeways a lot, just in my day-to-day activities, and if you can be in bumper to bumper traffic and smell it.
Oh yeah.
People smoking while they're driving because they have the idea that it doesn't affect them.
Right.
Well, it does.
Well, we also might be in the same era as the put the kids in the back with no seatbelt because seatbelts aren't a thing yet kind of thing as far as that goes. And I mean that specifically in regards to actively testing. Because I can guarantee if we had a similar DUI testing as alcohol, you'd see a lot more marijuana-related DUIs, but two, you'd see a lot more like accidents or preventative measure. I probably shouldn't because I know X, Y, and Z. Just like you see now. Probably shouldn't get in my car after the bar because it's 2 a.m. and I'm hammered right now. Kind of thing.
So and my point in bringing that up is it's a fear for a lot of parents.
Totally.
What's out there for our children, and peer pressure is a huge thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's
It is. It's a scary thing, especially nowadays. It's just death that's out there. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's a whole.
Yeah,
it's very unfortunate.
Yeah. So, I'm really hoping that this podcast goes out and reaches, people of all ages, young people that could hear the story, parents so they can hear the story, and we have to do something because it's there. And like you said, fentanyl in and by itself is just an epidemic. It's just out of control. And the only way that that's going to end is if we, the people, are more aware of it and just stop being stupid and
stop using it,
and stop using it, or stop using other things that may. Yeah. So, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
This has been a great podcast, and I can't thank you enough, Daniel, for sharing it, coming here, and it's like, and it's amazing. And I got to tell people this too, is that you are an amazing individual, proud that you're a friend, and I know that you're going to be successful. I know that you're going to do and find things to do with your life that are just, good stuff. It's no doubt in my mind. None whatsoever.
Thank you.
And we're going to have you back on again and find out where you're at and how you're doing. And
absolutely. Love to update you.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been a pleasure. I mean, it's really cool, coming in here and, Stephen, kind of mentioning, what you do and being able to talk to you has been really awesome, and to connect. And I love Stephen to death, and to be able to meet his family is just like really cool. You guys are super dope. Like what you guys have is really beautiful. And
thank you.
I love that.
We're happy you're a part of it, man.
Yeah. You are part of the family, and and part of what we do is exactly what we talk about. We communicate openly, we talk openly. It's not that we don't all have our biases and our views and our opinions and our disagreements, but I think one of the things that we have learned is that everybody can have an opinion. That's fine. And it may not match my opinion. That's fine. I have mine. You have yours. Stephen has his. Brian, I'm not really sure, has an opinion on anything. But we find that communication is really, really the best. Best way to.
Yeah, and they said, I heard it recently where it was, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but it's connection. Right. Mm-hmm. And when I heard that, I was like, well, that's kind of dangerous because you got to be sober, you can't be singing. But what they really mean is that like connection is really at the heart of all of it. Ultimately with the group of men and the journey is that there's connection there, right? Real connection, whether it be spiritual, whether it be personal, that is really what it is, right? It's getting your needs met, and a lot of
spirituality seems like it really plays a huge role for you too.
100%.
And that's amazing because that's whether your belief is God, whether it's Buddha, whether it's the universe, the sun, whatever it is that holds that power of life is important.
Yeah, trying to do this like without a spiritual connection is tying your hands behind your back. Yeah. It's like, I used to think that it was like a weakness and a crutch, until I realized the real strength that it takes to like put faith in something you can't touch, see, feel, or write down on a piece of paper. You know what I mean?
No, that's why they call it faith.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Finding answers in the heart, and I do believe that that's like a connection between like, where God lies, right? God is everything or God is nothing. And I just use the term God just because it's just easy. I just choose to call it God. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's whatever. It's constantly changing. I spend less and less time trying to define it,
Yeah.
At the beginning, it was something I really struggled with was this like idea of God or the spirit of the universe or higher power or whatever, God, gift of desperation. That was a big one for me, like that desperation was a gift, It's an acronym for God,
Well, I think that there are times too that we forget how insignificant we are. And when I say we, I don't mean just us sitting in this room. I mean us in this world. You know, and sometimes you're thinking about these leaders of different countries that are causing so much havoc and so much just so they can have a little bit more control, a little bit more money, a little bit more whatever. And I was listening to a podcast the other day, and the scientist that was on that I was listening to was talking about the new telescope that they launched up into space, and, you know, and how it worked. And now it's 1 million freaking miles away, and it's taking pictures of new stars being built in different universes and different galaxies. And this isn't the only galaxy, and there's others out there, and there's how many others, and how endless is space.
Right.
And when you look at it like that, we as a world are so freaking insignificant.
Right.
And yet we cannot figure out a way how to get along.
Yeah.
We can't figure out a way to get along in our own city.
Right. Yeah.
Let
our own homes,
alone our own state.
Yeah.
Let alone our own country, the world in general. And you stop and you wonder why? What the fuck is so important that you can't just walk down the street in happiness and some harmony with other people that are living here?
Yeah.
That there's got to be bickering, there's got to be arguing, there's got to be crime, there's got to be, you know, just so much shit.
Yeah.
And it's like, why?
Right.
You know, I don't get it.
One thing that I think was so important that your crew touched on, that I think people in general need to touch on, is that sense of community and that communication and that open dialogue. Because as Mike's saying, people are walking through society and through public in an isolation, in isolation. And what was amazing about going and just spending that hour that I did with you was you read a passage, and then every person in that room got 3 minutes to digest that passage and make a comment or add to whatever they felt about that passage.
Right.
Every single person. And what happens is as a bystander, you're sitting there listening to fathers who got to reconnect with their kids around the Halloween, you know, and like go to parties. People who clearly used to not be able to stand themselves, now love themselves. Reaching out to friends and saying thank you, or you're looking great, or keep going. Like that's that tribal communal thing that we all strive for, that we need, that is abundant in the program, which I think I left that going, wow, I feel whole. I feel like I have a lot of stuff that I could go and share with people that, you know, like, so I think that people in general need to do more of that, opening up, being more communicative, because it strengthens the bonds.
And I feel like if you go to like a good church, like that'd probably be like, I guess the closest thing, you know, when people have like
I grew up Christian,
right, you know, so it's like, it's hard to find, right? And they talk about spirituality and religion, right? There's spirituality in religion, right? But there's no religion in spirituality, right? So you go to a church and you may find someone that has a connection with God, right? A spiritual connection, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that the entire, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like, I think that like, if you are creating an environment that is like that, you know, maybe a B3 or your church or whatever it may be, like, great, you know, but what I'm finding is like,
honestly, not to cut you off, I mean, you're going to find more Christ-like qualities in an versus a religion, just based on my experience. I only went to one, but there's a layer.
It's more attractive.
The word of Christ is always spoken through a person, which has a layer of judgment and preconceived notions and all these things, and itself, or at least the strips all of that away, because I cannot allot judgment on you in your lowest moments, and vice versa, right? We're not going to make it.
One of the things too is that, you know, spirituality and Christianity, like you say, are two separate things, because I know a lot of people that are very spiritual, but maybe not real religious.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are very spiritual, but maybe not real religious.
Yeah.
And a lot of people that are very spiritual, but maybe not real religious.
Yeah.
And was raised, and that's how I believe, and that's where my comfort is. But also, too, I believe in the spirituality of righteousness and doing good and sharing and energies. And, so there's a lot of that spirituality.
Spiritual principles, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
For me, I remove a lot of the dogma, but the reality is there's central truth. Like, Jesus was a badass dude, you know what I mean? Like, sounds like a rad man, and I would love to live my life as aligned to that. I was like hardcore atheist for the longest time, my guy that passed away, my dear friend, he was practicing like Catholic. He went every night at like midnight, from midnight to 2 a.m. He prayed and meditated. He had the keys to the church. They let him in, and he was, and that's what he did every night. You know what I mean? And like, we don't don't agree like with a lot of those same things, but that's what I realized. I'm like, that man is spiritual. He has found a spiritual connection, and it's whatever. I don't care what religion it is. I don't care what your God looks like, what his name is, what it's irrelevant. The fact that you have that connection, right on. You know what I mean? When you start bringing in the dogma and the other things, like, it's just not, for that might be for you, but for me, it's not as attractive.
Well, that's where meditation comes in, because meditation puts you in that area in the mind where it's open, to
listen. Praying is speaking, and meditating is listening.
Yeah, because what you hear or what you feel. I always relate it more to feeling, what you're feeling in the heart. That's like, you'd be astounded to hear when I pray, because it probably doesn't make any sense, really, if I were to actually verbalize the prayer, because it's coming from my mind, it's coming from my heart. And I always think, God knows what I mean.
Yeah. You talk to, I swear with God, God's just like there, like, and sometimes it's like, oh, like it might be out there, but for me, it's like, it's in here, right? And that faith is like the finding answers in the heart. Like, when I pray, and I usually pray for other people, and that they receive the blessings that I want for myself. I pray, for strength and clarity, so that I can, be of maximum service to the people around me, right? To the universe, to God. And then when I, meditate, I like receive, and then I listen, and there's like a connection, right? There's like and create a space. And then from that, like, answers come, right? There's like this deep sense of knowing, right? This idea of confusion is an illusion. Like, it's not really there, right? We know, right? Yeah. You can't be confused, because in truth, right?
And let's be clear too. We're all human, and we're going to pray for these strengths, and we're going to pray for these abilities to be the person that we want to be for other people, to be loyal, to be trustworthy, to be, kind, to be sharing, to all, whatever it is that we pray to. We have the ability to be those things, but we're not going to be those things all the time, and we're going to fall short. And that's where prayer and meditation comes in, to help you get back up. Yeah. Help you get back on your feet, help you take that next step forward of being a good person. Yeah. This isn't about just, getting up, putting one foot in front of the other so I can stay sober. This is, I want to get up, put one foot in front of the other so I can be a good person, so I can be a good citizen, so I can do good things for other people, so I can be a light, so I can, there's so much there. And I think that in our society, that is what's missing. Now, this isn't a call to Christianity at all. And I believe that, if you're an atheist and you don't believe in God, you can still be a good person. You can be nice. You can be kind. You can be sharing. You can be whatever. This is, it doesn't matter if you're, what your religious beliefs are. I mean, people are fighting and dying over religious beliefs. If that isn't, where's the irony in that? I'm going to kill you because you don't believe in my faith. Well, if you can kill me for your faith, then it's really not a faith that I want to have.
Yeah, it's not attractive.
It's the whole thought and whole idea of spirituality is, what kind of a person can you be?
Yeah.
How kind can you be? How about this, for example? How forgiving can you be? I may have done something to you that you don't agree with.
Right.
Can you forgive me? There's spirituality right there.
100%.
That's spirituality.
Yeah, of course.
Don't tell me how spiritual you are. Don't tell me how enlightened you are if you don't have forgiveness in your heart.
There's humility, right? You don't say it, you just be it.
You show it.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, you embody it, right? Jesus was like an embodied being, right? He just showed up for those people, right? He hung out with all those people that were like struggling and, and lost, and that's where his work was, right?
Yes.
And there's like
Who did he associate with?
right.
Thieves, the no-gooders,
The forgiveness, man, that's a huge one for ourselves, for those around us, but there's, the St. Francis prayer, like I still adopt a lot of stuff like from Christianity. It's St. Francis I actually have on my necklace right here. He's my favorite saint. And in the prayer it just says grant that I may seek rather to comfort than to be comforted, right? To understand than to be understood, to love than to be loved. For it is by self-forgetting that one finds, it is by forgiving that one is forgiven, and it is by dying that one awakens to eternal life. I think that's just such like it just hits it on the nose.
It hits everything.
How can I be more present? How can I be more of service? Right? For God. And when I say God, I just mean the freaking universe. You know what I mean? The spirit of whatever it is. Like the word God like really turns people off. It did for me for a long time, and I just choose to call it God because it's easier than saying. I usually just wrap them off. I'm like God's, higher power, spirit of the universe, holy, whatever. Like
Yeah, but it's it's a universally accepted word.
Yeah.
We know what it means. Nobody knows what it is.
Yeah.
But we know what it means. We know what it's meant to be.
Right. But the spiritual foundation has been is a huge part of it. That is ultimately like the goal, right? Is to like find that connection, because ultimately that's what's going to save your skin. That's what's going to like fill the life up, right? There's like force, and then there's power, right? There's like what we try to like muscle screw ourselves to get through life and like make these things happen, and then and that's force, and you can get a lot of way like with that effort, but you'll hit a point where you can't anymore, right?
You can't do it. I always tell people that, what, every time I've ever tried to handle it myself, take control of it, and I've got this, I've fucked it up.
Yeah.
Every time I've turned it over to God, miracles happen. And
it's just untapped. I don't know what it is, like what that is. It's just there's something there, and the prayer and meditation kind of opens my channel enough for it to kind of come through.
Yeah.
Right. The more open I can like settle my mind and drop a little bit deeper, like the easier those things come and flow. Right.
Yeah.
And I can like
absolutely. Yeah. And it's an amazing part of spirituality, because really when you look at spirituality, in my opinion, my view, it's energy. It's the energy that you exude, energy that you absorb.
Right.
And to me, it's when you put more positive energy out there, more positive energy is going to come back.
Yeah, you like invest it.
Yeah, and people argue with that, like with law of attraction, you can't will something, you can't. I agree. I agree. But to me, law of attraction is tied into the spirituality of the energy going out there, and whatever the higher being is that receives this energy and this positive and this thought process, it returns it in favor. There's the old saying, and it's biblical, that when you tithe, you receive 10 times in return.
Right.
Okay. You know what?
100%.
There's truth to it.
Yeah.
I don't know how it happens.
I mean, I don't know how you measure 10, but I mean, but the reality is,
Yeah.
it's like, you get out what you put in. When I just like, I get more, like way more, like going and showing up and like working with someone, that's like struggling and doing, like, I'm helping them, but like it helps me even more. You know what I mean? I'm like, I just show up, right? And then I'm there, and it's not up to me whether like they take it and run with it and do, like I just have to be there, right? And I have to show up and be there for that person, and it's beautiful because someone did that for me, and it's like this forever like cycle of us all really being working towards a common goal,
Sure.
right? You know, and I mean, I've out of all the situations and of all the things of like ideas of world peace, it's the closest thing I've ever experienced to coming close to that, right? Right. If you have like
I agree.
religions, there's a lot of people that like fight and stuff, but this like overall, like pick whatever it is. I hope it's something personal to you, you know, and let's coexist, right? You can have like a Hebrew like working with a, you know, you can have a Jew like working with like a Christian working with, you know, like an atheist working with, you know what I mean? And it's just like this beautiful, like,
Well, that's what I try to relay. My message when I do talk to people about things like this, you know, it's especially when we saw everything over the last, you know, few years go so fucking crazy with, you know, the our politics and, you know, what's going on in the country and, you know, just everybody's just fighting and arguing, and so it seems.
yeah,
But to me, you got 5% over here, and you got 5% over here arguing and stirring and creating hate and creating so much animosity in the whole world.
yeah,
The other 90% of us are forgotten. Because I tell you what, I go to the grocery store and I'll be walking down an aisle and somebody's coming and, hey, good afternoon. Oh, hi, how are you?
yeah,
You know, talk to the cashier, very friendly, very nice. You walk outside, meet somebody, very friendly, very nice. You go to a restaurant, the waitress, typically very friendly, very nice. The world is full of people like us that are very nice, very, you know, engaging, and just want to be happy.
That's why I like the recovery community, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you voted for. You know what I mean? Like our hands here, you know what I mean? And like the connections that I have with all sorts of people that I don't agree at all with, like I love to death, dude. You know what I mean? And like we like, it's funny. Like we'll get in like little arguments and like spats and stuff, especially like 2020 when everything got just so like turned on one another. Like, you know, we'd have like these huge blowout, like Facebook things, you know, and we'd see each other, you know, like when we're together and just like, I fucking love you, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's really, it's irrelevant, right? You know, it's like we become so tribal and we judge so much and make someone's identity like this like thing. Like I really don't feel like anyone has any ill intent or like hatred towards one another. I think that everyone's really just trying to, you know, act with love, right? What they know love to be. You know?
I think my view is, I think that the majority of us are like that. We just want to go to work. We want to come home. We want to send our kids to a good, you know, healthy, safe school. We want to maybe go out to dinner every once in a while. We want to, you know, feel protected in our own home. We're all the same. There's nothing distinguishes us.
We're made of the same
differently.
stuff,
We're made of the same stuff. We're the same people. We're the same thoughts. We're the same processes. Everything is identical. I was a police officer, you know, for a few years, and in the city that I was working at was considered to be more of a high crime area. Honest to God, 95% of the people that lived there were hardworking, wanted to have a home for their family. Just parents, just whatever. It was the small percentage that created the crime. Everybody else was just there trying to get by day to day.
So here's something that I like to share. That's you know, an old spiritual mentor of mine, you know, had brought up one time in like a group setting, and it's like really stuck with me. And I don't know where he got it or what, but it's something that it's always been in the back of my mind that I live with, and it's you know, that like everything that we've ever done, are doing, and will do is an expression of love or a calling for it. No exceptions, right? There's no exceptions to that role, you know, and immediately it's like, well, there's just like bad people, right? You go to like Hitler, you go to like, you know, all these like, but the reality is like, well, what does love really equal, right? Like, what do we know love to be? And like, how do we express that? And the reality is like, I really do believe that people are calling for or expressing the love that they know, right?
Right.
And ultimately, like, understanding that, like, I have so much more compassion for anyone in any other situation. I know that we're, you know, it's like, oh, like when I realized that that's like, this is where they're coming from, right? It's this, like, they're seeking love in the way they know it to be, right? Or they're calling for it, right? They're expressing it, you know, and I just is something that I've mulled on for a very long time, and it just kind of rings true. You know, I really don't think that there's people that act out of like hate. I don't think that that's like a thing, you know, and that's a very controversial topic. You know, a lot of people don't agree with me on that, but I say it's like a fierce faith that like it's just a knowing, dude. You know, it's freaking love. You know, it might be obscure on what you think love is, but that's what you want. That's what
I really believe that the majority of people are just looking for happiness, some joy, and some freedom. Yeah. And you know that binds us all together. We're you know, happiness, joy, freedom can equal love, can equal, you know, how you look at life, spirituality. But I think that all of us are in this together, and we forget that we're in it together, and we forget that we all are looking for and searching for the same thing, maybe in different ways. Your happiness is going to be different than my happiness. My joy is going to be different than Steve's joy, you know, but, you know, we all are looking for that same thing, you know, and the only way we're going to ever find it is when we all band together and treat each other with respect and with joy.
It's a stronger feeling too, like having that connection, like, you know, we tend to like stay tribal and fight or flight and distance ourselves, and you know, because it kind of like feels good almost, right? It's like part of our body to like no, you know, and differentiate ourselves, but it is low vibrational, right? It's not as strong as that feeling of like forgiving, like moving into forgiveness for somebody that's like done something really wrong, you know, or having that sense of camaraderie, right? Togetherness, right? Like after like 9/11 happened, right? Everyone was like, boom, like this togetherness. And that's like such a stronger feeling, like putting yourself out on the limb and for our better nature, right? Like housing and feeding those whom we like despise and had these like resentments towards, like really opening ourselves and bringing that, like that is really what we're living for, you know? And I choose to believe that is stronger than anything, you know? I agree. And that is underlying all. So.
Well, my friend, with that.
All right.
Thank you, bud.
Absolutely.
I appreciate you being here. This is a great time.
Yeah.
Really do.
All righty.
All right. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much. Peace.
Oh yeah.
You guys want to take a guess on how long it is? It's been 3 hours. Still, like, that's